Got the move, tutor. After the match, Johan high-fived Haunter and Vulpix. Their goal had been simple: reach the quarterfinals and secure the move tutor reward. Now that they had accomplished that, there was no pressure for the rest of the tournament. The Rustboro Pokemon Academy had an extensive move library, but the Move Tutor Prize could unlock exclusive techniques rarely found on the market, moves like Swords Dance or Hyper Beam, which were nearly impossible to obtain through conventional means. If they could get one of those, it would be a massive win. Back in the stands. A groan! Devon's Agron nearly collapsed in relief the moment Johan returned. Carefully setting Tinkeradink down, the Steel Titan wasted no time retreating into its Pokeball. Johan raised an eyebrow, then glanced at Tinkeradink. Chew? Tinkeradink tilted her head innocently, blinking sweetly. Johan turned to Steven for an explanation. Steven, maintaining his usual composed smile, said, Tinkeradink helped Agron identify a flaw. A flaw? Roxanne and Flannery exchanged knowing glances, giving Johan a clue. Looking more closely, he noticed Tinkeradink clutching a small piece of dark gray metal. Johan? Could it be? Tinkeradink had actually pried off a piece of Agron's armor. Noticing his expression, Tinkeradink quickly tucked the metal behind her back, whistling innocently as she averted her gaze. Chew Epsilon, that piece was loose. Seeing the dark lines forming on Johan's forehead, Steven quickly added, Don't blame her, teacher. In fact, Agron and I owe her our thanks. Ha! Agron consumes a lot of metal, and over time it sheds old, hardened armor that has lost its original strength. When the new armor grows in, it's stronger than before. Steven smiled at Tinkeradink. The spot she found was one that both Agron and I had overlooked. Tinkeradink had an innate ability to recognize imperfections in metal structures, an ability that typically made her a skilled repairer. Johan had assumed his Tinkeradink lacked that trait, given that everything she fixed ended up in pieces. Turns out she just preferred repairing other Pokemon's armor. I'm even considering letting her take a look at Skarmory, Steven mused thoughtfully. Tinkadink's eyes gleamed with excitement. Metal, armor, bird, all the perfect elements. Johan swiftly scooped her up. Steven's idea sounded bold, but allowing Tinkeradink near Skarmory would surely result in it being stripped down to bare feathers. Tinkeradink placed her hands on her hips and arched her brow. Chew. Cool, right? Johan's eye twitched. Yeah. Cool. Too cool. Rustboro Pokemon Academy Administration Office. Head Instructor Minjiang reviewed the updated roster of teachers who had advanced to the quarterfinals. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Pokemon Psychology Instructor Johan? Every year, a handful of non-battle instructors participated in the Academy's battle assessment. For battle instructors, it was an evaluation of their skills. For others, it was more of a bonus round, a way to earn extra credit. Winning even a single match granted a few bonus points during faculty evaluations. That's why so many non-battle instructors signed up. But advancing to the quarterfinals? That was rare. Signaled that the instructor in question wasn't just competent in their field, but had potential as a battle teacher as well. They might not qualify as full-time advisors, but they could certainly serve as combat theory instructors. Minjiang had heard of Johan. He had a growing reputation in the academy, and his research papers and videos were becoming increasingly popular online. Minjiang smiled. Perhaps we should expand his benefits a little. The academy was always looking to support well-rounded instructors, especially those with a bit of a public profile. It helped attract students, after all. If he makes it to the semifinals? He trailed off, shaking his head. Making the semifinals would be an entirely different challenge. Still, even at this stage, Johan was shaping up to be a strong contender for the Outstanding Teacher Award. Back at Johan's place. Come on out, Nitqueen. Neato. Yawning and stretching, Nitqueen rubbed her eyes. That had been an unbelievably good sleep. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like to rest so deeply. Her dream had been peaceful, free of worries, as if the entire world had belonged to her alone. Waking up, she felt oddly refreshed. Better than she had in ages. Aside from a slight hunger. Suddenly, a savory scent wafted past her nose. Neato! She lifted her head curiously, spotting Johan standing in front of her, a tray of freshly made, steaming poke blocks in his hands. Want some? Ooh, they're really good. Vulpix mumbled, her cheeks stuffed with food. Haunter, hanging upside down from the ceiling, waved at Nitqueen with a mouthful of poke blocks. Meanwhile, Tinkeradink barely spared Nitqueen a glance, far more focused on the piece of Agron's armor she had acquired. She was already hammering away at it, contemplating how to incorporate it into her own hammer. Nitqueen's gaze lingered on Johan. She didn't find him quite as irritating as before. But still, she wasn't just going to accept food from a male. Neato! Oh, Kara, oh! She turned away with a huff. Johan simply chuckled and set the poke blocks in front of her. All right, I'll go make some other flavors. Moments later, he heard a quiet chewing sound. He waited a beat before casually walking by again. Neato! Nitqueen's head snapped up, cheeks puffed out, eyes wide with surprise and mild panic. It looked like she wanted to explain something, but as she opened her mouth, she nearly spat out the food, so she quickly shut it. Gulp. Under Johan's amused gaze, she swallowed hard. Neato. Oh, #oh. What are you looking at? I'll claw your eyes out. Johan grinned. A bit of a tsunder, Sigma. Haunter rolled across the ceiling, clutching his sides in laughter. Nitqueen's face turned scarlet. With a sudden burst of frustration, she swung a fist at Haunter. Ice spread across her hand. Ice punch! Haunter, still grinning, responded in kind. Shadow punch! Their fists clashed midair. Bam! Haunter's punch was deflected, frost creeping up his hand. Caw. But he didn't seem upset. In fact, he looked thoughtful. Nitqueen's ice punch. She crossed her arms, tilting her head smugly. Neato. Concede. Haunter licked his lips. Caw. Bring it on. Nitqueen's eyes gleamed. Johan sighed. If you're going to fight, take it outside. Vulpix and Tinkeradink immediately followed. Johan leaned back, watching them go. They were definitely going to steal something from Nitqueen. They really are milking it to the last drop. In an old, abandoned activity square in the town's historic district, sitting in a row on an old iron pipe, panting heavily, were Nitqueen, Haunter, Vulpix, and Tinkeradink, from biggest to smallest. Caw. Not bad, big girl. Ooh. Pretty tough. Chew. Think this pipe has any good metal if I smash it open? Nitqueen scratched her head, then turned away with a soft huff. Neato. Even if you all compliment me, I won't be happy about it. But the pleased smirk tugging at her lips betrayed her true feelings. Haunter chuckled and produced a box from his mouth, revealing a stash of poke blocks. Hoo. Vulpix blinked, staring in disbelief. No wonder Johan's supply kept running low. Haunter had been hoarding them. Till Haunter casually passed poke blocks around to everyone. Nitqueen eyed the poke block in her hand, then shot a skeptical glance at Haunter's mouth. Neato. Is it really safe to eat? Caw, don't mind if I do. Haunter reached for some himself, only for Nitqueen to react faster, stuffing the entire stash into her mouth in one swift gulp. Chew. Tinkeradink, cheeks full, chewed in quiet confusion. She hopped down from the pipe, gripping her hammer, and started measuring out her swing. A faint rocky glow wrapped around the hammer as she concentrated. Then, bam! Aside from a noticeable dent in the ground, nothing else happened. Neato. Shaking her head, Nitqueen stepped forward and took Tinkeradink's hammer, but her expression shifted slightly as she felt its surprising weight. Impressed, she quickly handed it back, looking at Tinkeradink with newfound respect. Such a small Pokémon but so strong. Without making a big deal out of it, Nitqueen cleared her throat and demonstrated a move. Lifting her arm, she channeled rock-type energy around her fist, forming a swirling force before slamming it into the ground. Crash! A massive stone spike erupted from the earth. If Johan had been there, he would have recognized the move immediately. Stone Edge! And he'd probably be shocked too. Nitqueen wasn't holding back at all, immediately demonstrating a high-difficulty move like Stone Edge. Could Tinkeradink even learn it? And it wasn't just Tinkeradink. Haunter and Vulpix, having finished their poke blocks, suddenly had their own questions. Now, Nitqueen wasn't exactly dumb, but she wasn't the best teacher either. Just because she could do something didn't mean she knew how to explain it. Scratching her head, she stood around awkwardly, clearly stumped. Neato. Guess it's not so easy after all. Just then, a Persian strolled into view, followed by a gang of scrappy-looking stray Pokémon. Johan's neighborhood was full of wild Pokémon. Vulpix had once been one of them, and her timid nature had often made her a target for bullying. This Persian was the self-proclaimed leader of the local strays, known for intimidating weaker Pokémon and swiping food to survive. It had come over to investigate the noise. But the moment its eyes met the four smiling figures in front of it, Persian froze. A chill ran down its spine. Cold sweat prickled its fur as it forced an awkward grin. Meow, meow. Sorry to intrude. Haunter and the others exchanged looks, their grins widening as they waved Persian and its gang over. Caw, 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 caw. No need to be scared. We're the good guys. Nightfall. King of the Earth. How's Nitqueen doing? Johan, feeling a bit like an empty nester, sat alone on his new couch. Glancing over at his Pokémon playing a card game on the living room floor, each with a little slip of paper stuck to their forehead, he replied to Giovanni's message. Grain in the field, she's doing well. Johan couldn't help but wonder if he was becoming unnecessary. King of the Earth, good to hear. Jengar sighing in relief emoji. The expressive Jengar emoji made Johan pause. Did Lady Kikuko possess Giovanni? King of the Earth, if you need extra supplies, let me know. Grain in the field, not much. Just some extra poke blocks, berries, moo milk, protein shakes, antidotes, potions, candy, some extra groceries. Even Giovanni took a second to process the long list. King of the Earth, did you start a war? Against the League? Was it just Johan, or did Giovanni sound a little too excited? Grain in the field. Nah, just speed up the local stray Pokémon gang, that's all. King of the Earth, got it. And with that, Giovanni's icon went dark. That's it. Johan pinched the bridge of his nose. Nitqueen was recovering faster than expected. With her face covered in sticky notes from the card game, she looked nothing like the sulking Pokémon she had been when she first arrived. Still, Johan could tell she hadn't fully moved on yet. A few more nights of sweet dream therapy and some motivational speeches should do the trick. Glancing over at his computer screen, Johan grinned. With these notes, I could pass as a Pokémon relationship specialist. Looks like I found a new skill. Late night. After guiding Nitqueen into a peaceful sleep with Vulpix's special lullaby, Johan finally crawled into bed. Vulpix stretched luxuriously, snuggling under the blanket and curling up around Johan's arm. Tinkeradink, meanwhile, tucked her hammer under the pillow and promptly started snoring. Half draped over the bed's headboard, she buried her head in the pillow. From time to time, her limbs twitched, reaching for an imaginary hammer, causing the pillow to slide over her nose and momentarily block her breathing. Caw-caw. Haunter, as always, was semi-attached to the ceiling. If anyone looked up, they might mistake him for a ghost floating in a hot spring. Johan mumbled drowsily. Haunter. Caw-caw. Should I get you a coffin? Can't have you sleeping on the ceiling forever. Caw-caw. Sigma, LLL. Haunter froze at the word coffin, but relaxed upon hearing the rest. Just as he was about to reply, he noticed Johan had already fallen asleep. After a moment, Haunter chuckled quietly and floated down, tucking Johan in before carefully moving Tinkadink's pillow to keep it from blocking her nose. Yawning, he stretched out comfortably. Caw. Good night, Macapaka.
Hey, everyone. If you enjoy my quantum audiobooks, you can support me by becoming a Patreon member. Your support helps me keep creating, and you'll get exclusive perks. You can also access my audiobooks directly through Google Drive. Check out the link in the description. Now, let's get started.
The faculty moved a large machine onto the battlefield. First glance, it looked like a lottery machine, but inside were Pokeballs containing Pokémon used in the Academy's training. Each instructor would receive 12 random Pokémon. This randomness was considered the fairest method, as each Pokémon had subtle differences even if they shared the same moves and abilities. Caw. Woo. Choo. In the stands, Haunter, Vulpix, and Tinkeradink cheered for Johan, each waving a little pom-pom. They were a bit disappointed they couldn't join the battle, but if Johan won this round and made it to the semifinals, he'd earn the top 4 prize, a rare evolution stone. And if he made it to the semifinals, there would be no more rental matches, meaning they'd be up for battle again soon enough. Just the thought got them excited. Out on the field, Johan received a tray with 12 Pokeballs and a sheet listing each Pokemon's name, ability, and moves. He was given 10 minutes to review and select items for them, up to a maximum of 6. But as Johan read through the list of 12 Pokémon he'd received, he felt a headache coming on. Raticate, Arbok, Feraligatr, Beautifly, Drifloon, Frosmoth. One Pokémon, however, did catch his eye. Dolliv. A grass/normal Pokémon from Paldea, Dolliv was gentle-natured and excelled in special attack and special defense. His 10 minutes went by quickly. Johan's opponent was Carl, the senior instructor for the second-year Battle Department Class 3. He was renowned for his impressive skills and experience. The battlefield's main screen displayed both instructors' portraits along with 3 Pokeballs representing each chosen Pokémon. At the referee's signal, the two stepped onto the field. Carl, tall and slender with glasses, wore a confident smile that seemed to say he was very sure of his choice of Pokémon and strategy. But out loud he said, "Professor Johan, please go easy on me." Seeing Carl's smug attempt at humility, Johan thought of a perfect word to describe his opponent's attitude. Pretentious. Johan's reputation was established, especially for his tactical prowess. But Carl saw him as someone with a hobby challenging his own profession. Johan might have tactical skill, but the 12-choose-3 rental mode required exceptional expertise. And Carl had gotten quite lucky, drawing Pokémon that played well to his strengths. When Carl's humble appeal met with Johan's smile, Johan simply replied, "All right." Carl was taken aback and narrowed his eyes. As the referee announced the start, both trainers threw their Pokeballs. Go, Rapidash! Go, Dolliv! Both Pokémon appeared on the field at the same time. Grass against fire? Johan might be in for a rough start. Where did Dolliv even come from? Professor Carl is a specialist in fire and flying types, so this is a great start for him. Luck is part of skill, after all. Watching the 2 Pokémon appear, the spectators began discussing the match. For this high-stakes top 8 battle, professional commentators had also been provided. Dolliv is a Pokémon from the distant Paldea region. It seems Johan is well-versed in Pokémon even from far-off regions. Unfortunately, he's right up against Carl's specialty. Some of you might not realize just how big an advantage Rapid has here, so let me break it down. Rapidash was fast and had high attack power, while Dolliv specialized in special attack and defense but was extremely slow, not to mention the type disadvantage. After hearing the analysis, the crowd collectively sighed. There was no way Johan could win this round. Rapidash Flare Blitz, Carl said confidently, sweeping his hand forward. In an instant, Rapidash's body was completely engulfed in flames, and it charged at Dolliv like a blazing comet. With Dolliv's low speed, there was no chance of dodging. But Johan's command surprised everyone. Dolliv, use Leech Seed beneath you. Dolliv dropped a few tiny seeds at its feet, but before it could do anything else, Rapidash crashed into it with full force. Boom! Dolliv was sent flying. The referee raised his flag. Dolliv is unable to battle. It was taken down in one hit, as Carl's Rapidash was holding a charcoal item. Charcoal increases the power of fire-type moves by 20%. Crowd erupted in surprise. A one-hit knockout right at the start? Johan was done for. Or was he? While being knocked back, Dolliv had shaken loose several seeds which quickly sprouted and spread across the field. Dolliv's ability is Seed Sower, so the field has become grassy terrain. And because Rapidash used Flare Blitz, it took recoil damage from the collision. Wait! Dolliv was holding a rocky helmet, so the damage to Rapidash is even worse. On the field, Rapidash neighed in pain. Rocky Helmet inflicts damage on attackers who use contact moves. Wow, holding Rocky Helmet? Only Johan could think of something so devious. Does that mean Johan planned to sacrifice Dolliv from the start? And don't forget, Rapidash is entangled in Leech Seed too. Keen-eyed viewers noticed that while Rapidash had defeated Dolliv, it had taken substantial recoil damage from Flare Blitz, the Rocky Helmet, and the Leech Seed. And now the field was grassy terrain, enhancing grass-type moves and restoring a little HP each turn. So, will Johan's next Pokémon be another grass type? Grass types still get roasted by Rapidash. Recalling Dolliv, Johan smiled down at its Pokeball and said, "You did great. Leave the rest to the others." He threw out his next Pokeball, surprising everyone again. It was Drifloon, the ghost/flying-type balloon Pokémon. Wow, Johan has some bad luck. None of his Pokémon seem to form any kind of strong lineup. So what's the grassy terrain for? Passive healing. Most of the crowd knew Drifloon was a high HP but defensively weak Pokémon. In other words, a punching bag. But Drifloon immediately revealed the purpose of grassy terrain. A small seed dropped from Drifloon's body. A grassy seed. Grassy seed boosts defense when grassy terrain is active. But is that it? Drifloon's ability is Unburden, so after using its item, its speed has doubled. This answer from the commentators somewhat satisfied the crowd. Carl frowned. If Rapidash used Flare Blitz again, it would knock itself out. But Drifloon's Unburden had made it faster than Rapidash, so it could easily dodge now. Rapidash Flame Charge. Rapidash's fiery hooves flared up as it sprinted around the field. But Johan was unfazed. Drifloon Minimize. Drifloon's size shrank significantly, increasing its evasiveness. Rapidash's Flame Charge sailed past without hitting. However, Rapidash's speed increased. Drifloon Minimize again. Rapidash another Flame Charge. Rapidash circled the field as Drifloon continued to shrink, its evasiveness growing each time. Rapidash's second Flame Charge also missed. This back and forth continued until finally Rapidash connected. Yet Johan only gave one command. Minimize again. On the third use, Drifloon was now only the size of a fist. A minimize strategy? Doesn't that fail if it gets hit by something like Body Slam? True, but Rapidash doesn't seem to know that move. With Rapidash sustaining itself on grassy terrain's healing, Carl changed tactics. Rapidash Flamethrower. Cover the area. While Rapidash had high attack, most fire Pokémon could use both attack and special moves. Its Flamethrower covered half the field, blanketing Drifloon in flames. Yet Johan's instructions took a new turn. Drifloon Calm Mind. Calm Mind raises a Pokémon's special attack and special defense. With Calm Mind enhancing its defenses and grassy terrain's healing, Drifloon seemed unscathed. Thanks to Leech Seed, recoil from Rapidash's moves, and grassy terrain's passive healing, Drifloon soon maxed out its Calm Mind stacks without losing much HP. Eventually, Rapidash fainted from Leech Seed damage. Carl's second Pokémon was Typhlosion. While Typhlosion knew moves like Body Slam and Smokescreen, Drifloon's Calm Mind, Substitute, and Speed advantage rendered them ineffective. Even when Typhlosion's Body Slam connected, Drifloon's durability and grassy terrain meant it survived without much trouble. Once Drifloon maxed out its stats, Johan's strategy reached its true potential. Drifloon Baton Pass. Crowd gasped. I thought he was going for a minimized strategy, but it's a Baton Pass strategy. A fully maxed special attack and special defense? Even if he Baton Passed to a little Growlithe, it'd still have ridiculous special attack. Frosmith? But it's 4 times weak to fire. Indeed, the recipient of the boosted stats was Frosmith, an Ice/Bug type. Yet, as a result of Baton Pass, this Frosmith now had full special attack and special defense. More importantly, Frosmith used Light Screen. Johan smiled. Oh no! The students need to know that Johan's Frosmith has Ice Scales. Ice Scales halves damage from special moves. Now fully boosted with max special defense, Ice Scales having special attack damage and Light Screen having it again, Typhlosion's Fire-type moves were effectively nullified. Even with Typhlosion's type advantage, it's like scratching an itch. Finally, someone in the crowd realized Frosmith's 125 special attack stat, enhanced by 6 Calm Mind boosts, translated to a 400% increase in power. Now it's a sweep. Even if Carl had 12 Pokémon, they'd all be defeated at this point. This was the allure of the Baton Pass strategy. Once the Baton Pass succeeded, the rest was smooth sailing. Frosmith's item? Leftovers. Its survivability was maxed out. Desperately, Carl tried his third Pokémon, Torkoal, with Clear Smog to remove Frosmith's boosts. Yet the slow Torkoal was easily outspeeded, and even Clear Smog couldn't keep up with Frosmith's substitute. In the end, Johan won the battle with an overwhelmingly tactical victory, and the entire match had been recorded and live-streamed. You ghosts, your tactics are always so dirty. You hit me, but you can't actually hurt me, nah. Hey everyone, am I doing a good impression? My 40-foot broadsword almost couldn't stay put. I'm a student from the Orange/Grape Academy in Paldea, and this tactic, I think I can use it. To the person above, I suggest you act like a decent human. I propose we get Professor Johan to teach at our Orange/Grape Academy. At Clavelander's principal. Professor Johan belongs to Hoenn. Since this was just a routine instructor assessment for the Academy's top 8 round, the livestream was only popular within Hoenn. However, as the battle progressed, interest skyrocketed, especially when the Baton Pass tactic took center stage. The hype grew exponentially, and many people had to watch the replay to see the full extent of the strategy. When they finished watching, they couldn't help but head to the bathroom to wash their faces and rinse their eyes. Thrall, dirt should be washed away. But there was one consensus across the internet. Although there were previously videos of Johan's tactical gameplay, like his Substitute and Toxic Skarmory strategy or Lapra's Perish Song strategy, those battles weren't enough to earn him the title of Tactical Master, not even close. This battle, however, left everyone completely convinced of Johan's strategic brilliance. In a random 12-3 Pokémon selection with bad luck, his opponent had drawn a hand with type advantage, while Johan's choices were nearly all disadvantaged. Olive Daldaliv was doubly weak to fire, and Frosmith was 4 times weak to fire. Yet, despite such a massive disadvantage, he achieved a 4-fold type resistance reversal with perfect strategy and insight. This was not the type of battle tactics that the average trainer possessed. Just this one match earned Johan the title of Tactical Master. This title was officially cemented by one comment from Hoenn's veteran Elite Four member Drake. This is possible? Even though most Dragon-type specialists are not known for complex tactics, Drake's stature carried enough weight. Following this, the Jennies made a collective statement. They revealed part of the encirclement strategy, crediting Johan for its design as a tactical foundation provided for their unit by him as an instructor. The internet exploded with responses. So, what was once a high but manageable level of popularity suddenly soared, driven by such high-profile endorsements. People across Hoenn started to acknowledge that Professor Johan is a true tactical master. Of course, Johan himself, just finishing the battle, had no idea. If he did, he would probably shout in exasperation, "They're killing me with kindness." This was nothing short of putting him on an impossible pedestal. "Professor Johan, so you're actually the true master of reverse typing." As Johan returned to the stands, Flannery couldn't help but exclaim. Since Carl specialized in fire types and Flannery did as well, she felt a particular attachment to this matchup. Master of reverse typing? They hadn't seen a true master yet. Battling with full boosts was far from true reverse typing. True masters fought with raw resilience, tanking super effective hits and turning the tables even when disadvantaged. That was real reverse typing. Meanwhile, Haunter and the others were still holding their cheerleading pom-poms as they ran up. "Caw-caw. See? It's all because we cheered so hard." Haunter's face radiated a praise-me expression. Vulpix and Tinkeradink, meanwhile, appeared to be in deep thought. "What's on your mind?" Johan asked, kneeling down and petting Vulpix. "Ooh!" Vulpix suddenly let out an excited bark as if it had just come to a realization. "I get it." Grabbing Johan's hand, it barked again. "Ooh, ooh." So the safest way to battle is to knock out the opponent immediately. That way, there's nothing to worry about, right? It had reached this enlightenment from watching Frosmoth's sweep. Being an ice type itself, it felt an affinity with the strategy. Johan, he had thought Vulpix was disappointed about missing this round of battles. Now he realized he had completely misread the situation. "And you?" Johan asked, looking at the pondering Tinkeradink beside him. Tinkeradink raised its head and scratched the back of its neck. "Chew. That big moth isn't a bird, right? You literally called it a moth. How could it be a bird?" Johan sighed, watching the strange thoughts swirl around his Pokémon. "Congratulations, Professor." Devon and Roxanne, finally recovered from the shock of the battle, greeted him with congratulations. "Are you thinking about tactics?" Roxanne opened her notebook, prepared to take notes, while Steven asked, "Professor Johan, if we were up against your Baton pass strategy, how should we respond? Would red card work?" "Red card forces the attacker to switch out upon hitting the user." "No." Johan shook his head without hesitation. "Huh? Drifloon never attacks from start to finish. Minimize, Calm Mind, Baton Pass, and Strength Sap weren't offensive moves. So what about when it's Frosmotha's turn?" Steven pressed on. Johan smiled. "Frosmoth has Substitute, right? With Substitute, red card could never activate against it. Besides, who would think to equip their Pokémon with a red card without advanced knowledge of a Baton Pass strategy? Then how could we counter it?" Roxanne asked eagerly. "Carl did the right thing. Key is to disrupt the chain by taking out Dolive or Drifloon as early as possible," Johan said. Easier said than done. A well-trained Baton Pass user was incredibly difficult to eliminate. Alternatively, you could use Taunt. But then, Taunt could be blocked by moves like Protect, making it unreliable against Baton Pass. In truth, there were ways to counter Baton Pass, though the details could fill an entire lecture. Take, for example, the Parting Shot move from a certain big-headed tiger. Parting Shot reduces the target's attack and special attack, then switches the user out with a teammate. Or dealing with Drifloon's Minimize by using weight-based moves for a clean KO. But just like with red card, countermeasures could feel overly specific and situational. In a world where move slots were unrestricted, many tactics had a wide variety of counters but also an array of ways to prevent them. He clapped his hands. "Come on, let's go get some food." In a large, dimly lit office, a single lamp illuminated the desk, casting a soft glow over its surface. A faint rustling of pen strokes broke the silence. "Boss." Holding a tablet, Matori entered quickly, suddenly realizing she was still wearing her apron. Hastily, she removed it. When she looked up, she met Giovanni's gaze. "Forgive me, sir." Matori quickly stood at attention and raised her voice. Giovanni's calm expression softened as he put his pen down. Matori wasn't necessarily the best secretary, but she was one of the few excuses he had to unwind during a busy day. "What is it?" Giovanni asked. Relieved by the lack of anger in Giovanni's voice, Matori approached and handed over the tablet, explaining as she did. "It's Professor Johan." "Oh." Giovanni took the tablet, his interest piqued. He pressed play on a video. After watching, he petted his Persian, whose jeweled collar glistened in the lamplight. "An impressive strategy," he remarked. Matori felt a chill. To receive such praise from Giovanni indicated just how high Johan's tactical level was. No wonder Giovanni held Professor Johan in such regard. She was well aware of how much Giovanni valued talent. "Boss, there's also this report." Matori quickly handed over another document. "Jenny Unit Encirclement Tactics?" After a quick glance, Giovanni chuckled. Matori bit her lip, nervously voicing her concern. "Boss, will this affect us?" Giovanni's eyes glinted as he looked over the report. Of course, there would be an effect. A significant one. But, truthfully, Rocket's current scope and ambitions couldn't be contained by a few Jennies from Kanto and Johto. Besides, it would take time for the encirclement tactic to spread and be used widely. There was a limited supply of Pokémon like Arcanine with the hidden ability justified. Setting the report aside, Giovanni rested his chin on his hands. Matori seemed slightly uneasy. Truthfully, she respected Professor Johan. After a moment of contemplation, Giovanni's smile returned. "All right, then. Send him 1,000,000 $. As payment for Nidoking's care and congratulations for advancing in the tournament." "But, sir, I thought you were going to." Matori paused, blinking. "1,000,000? She had just been preparing to vouch for Johan, but now she was frozen. "Remember what I've told you before, Matori." Giovanni polished the onyx ring on his finger, spreading his palm open slowly. "The bigger picture, Matori. The bigger picture." "The bigger picture?" Matori murmured, lowering her gaze. Giovanni's smile grew. "If the league can offer him something, I can match it. And if the league can't offer something, I still can. A clever man will know how to choose." "But, sir, isn't he actually helping the league with this tactic?" Matori whispered, conflicted. "He's shown his value, that's enough. If the league can make use of it, why shouldn't we?" She nodded slowly. "However, doesn't Professor Johan still have no idea who we really are?" Giovanni stood, his gaze shifting to the office's floor-to-ceiling windows. "Matori, do you know why it's always the just who triumph in the end?" "The just? The league?" What did he mean? Giovanni answered, his voice clear and resolute. "Because only the victor is entitled to define justice." Matori stood, struck with awe, staring at Giovanni in admiration. This was the Giovanni she knew. "Has Mewtwo calmed down yet?" Giovanni asked suddenly. She snapped back, quickly replying, "Yes, sir. Mewtwo's stability has recently improved. Miss Sabrina has been invaluable in assisting, though she took quite a few hits for it." Giovanni smirked. "Tell it if it assists with this, I'll arrange for it to meet with Grain in the field." "Yes, sir." In Matori's mind, a tiny inner Matori blinked in confusion. So, when did Professor Johan become Rocket's incentive for Mewtwo? Back home, Johan released Nitqueen and let the little ones play together in the room. Meanwhile, he stepped onto the balcony, staring at the message on his phone showing a 1,000,000 $. Transfer. He was lost in deep thought. As expected of Giovanni, he really knows how to target people's weaknesses. Always striking where it hurts most, my fragile heart. For Johan, nothing was more tempting than money right now. But before he could dwell on it for long, his attention was drawn back to his phone by the endless stream of notifications. There was no avoiding it. This match had drawn unprecedented attention due to Drake, the Jenny officers, and the encirclement strategy's fame. On top of that, his excellent demonstration of tactical prowess had captured widespread interest. His online psychology consultation inbox and friend requests were now almost completely maxed out. Even if he set aside time for consultations, it felt like an endless queue. For the first time, being famous doesn't feel all that great. But soon, Cynthia's phone call rescued him from the bombardment. "Sino seems to be snowing," Cynthia began with her usual calm tone. Kanto, Giotto, and Hoenn regions weren't far apart, so they shared similar climates. Sino, however, was situated north of these regions, making it a bit colder overall. In fact, with Mount Coronet's influence and its constant snowfall, northern Sino was blanketed by snow throughout the year. "Well, that's nice. You can build a snowman," Johan joked. To his surprise, Cynthia seemed to take his words to heart. Her voice became softer, almost nostalgic. "When I was little in Celestic town, every snowfall Gibble and I would build snowmen. I'd build its parents, and it would build mine." Come to think of it, Cynthia had only ever mentioned her grandmother, Professor Carolina. She had never brought up her parents. "And none of our snowmen looked anything like what they were supposed to." Cynthia's voice turned lighthearted again, and Johan could almost picture her scrunching up her nose. "It's been so long since I last built a snowman." Before Johan could say anything, Cynthia seemed to realize she was veering off topic. She added, "I saw your match today. That was an interesting tactic. For others, it might have been tricky or clever, but for Cynthia, Garchomp could probably sweep the entire team with just one Dragon Rush. Ahem, it was just a casual strategy. Worked out better than I expected," Johan said, clearing his throat. "Drasna said your tactic inspired her a lot. She'd like to discuss it with you someday," Cynthia teased, a playful lilt in her voice. Johan paused. "Drasna? The Dragon Lady? The Bookworm? The future Ghost-type Elite Four of Unova? The famous novelist? It's just a regular Baton pass strategy." Johan muttered. "She's more interested in discussing creative writing with you." You sent Diantha a script once, didn't you? Drasna saw it and thought your ideas were interesting. Maybe share it with me too sometime." A cold sweat ran down Johan's forehead. He could sense a faint hint of danger over the phone. "Ahem, I borrowed it." "Borrowed?" Cynthia's tone sharpened. "An old man once told me this story, and I remembered it. I just adapted it a little." "Really?" Cynthia's voice dragged out, full of doubt. Really?" After a brief silence, Cynthia laughed, a clear, melodic sound. "All right, I just wanted to remind you not to forget the event in a few days." "Got it." Though he said that, Johan's mind was racing. A few days? What event? Thankfully, it wasn't something minor. He quickly remembered. The Pokémon Researcher Conference, Mount Coronet Edition. "Well, rest up. You had a big match today." Call ended. Johan's side hustle -1. "Sure," Johan replied. Just as he was about to hang up, he added, "Oh, one more thing. It's snowing, drink more hot water." Johan, having composed himself, was about to head back inside. But as soon as he stepped into the room, he froze. He glanced back at the balcony. "This is my house, right?" Unconvinced, he stepped in again and his jaw dropped. What is this? The once cozy room was now covered in snow and ice. From the looks of it, the space had been turned into a winter wonderland. Haunter emerged from a snow pile, completely covered in frost, looking like a snow haunter. "Caw-caw." Haunter grinned and waved at Johan. "Join us for a snowball fight." Thwack. Before Haunter could say more, a snowball flew at it from behind. The snowball passed harmlessly through Haunter and hit Johan squarely in the knee. Nitqueen! Nitqueen huffed in mock frustration, calling Haunter a cheater. Caca, caca, Haunter taunted her with a smug grin. Playing snowball fights with a ghost type? You're asking to lose. Thwack. This time, a snowball hit Haunter right in the face. Snow scattered everywhere. Haunter blinked in confusion. What just happened? Nitqueen burst out laughing, clutching her stomach. Nadu, Nadu. She smugly flexed her fists, which glowed faintly with ice-type energy, revealing that she'd used Ice Punch. Not to be outdone, Haunter plunged its claws into the snow, quickly forming a massive snowball. Nadu. Sigma, LLL. Cheater. Caca, caca. Haunter grinned wickedly and hurled the oversized snowball, burying half of Nitqueen under the snow. If you looked closely, you'd notice that Haunter's claws also carried traces of ice-type energy when it launched the snowball. Johan! A vein throbbed on his forehead. Before he could explode, Vulpix and Tinkeradink called out. Woo-woo-woo. Choo-choo. Looking in their direction, Johan saw a snowman standing between them. It bore a startling resemblance to himself, complete with a grinning Haunter perched on its shoulder, a tiny Vulpix on its head, and Tinkeradink cradled in its arms. It was almost disturbingly accurate. Nearby was a less fortunate attempt at a Nitqueen snowman, which had apparently been smashed apart. Johan turned to Nitqueen. She tilted her head and crossed her arms, her cheeks tinged pink. Nadu. It wasn't me. Johan took a deep breath. Then another. He muttered under his breath. The world is so beautiful, but I'm feeling so, what the heck is this mess? His fierce gaze swept the room. Following his line of sight, the Pokémon all looked around the room too. Haunter, Vulpix, Tinkeradink, and Nitqueen Ds. How did it turn out like this? So, who's responsible? They hesitated for a moment. Then, simultaneously, Haunter, Vulpix, and Nitqueen pointed fingers in completely different directions. Vulpix pointed at Haunter, Haunter pointed at Nitqueen, and Nitqueen pointed at Tinkeradink. Chew. Realizing it was being blamed, Tinkeradink raised its hammer and pointed at Vulpix. Johan. Perfect circle, huh? Haunter. He turned to the oldest and most mischievous culprit. Caw. Haunter laughed nervously, raising a claw to summon Ice-type energy. Ice Punch. Johan's eye twitched. It learned it? But Ice Punch alone couldn't have caused this chaos. Then Nitqueen stepped up, demonstrating her own Ice Punch. Tinkeradink raised its hammer, now covered in frost. Ice Hammer. Finally, Vulpix let out a small puff of icy breath. The frost swirled into a miniature snow tornado. Is that blizzard? Johan's eyes widened. It really learned it? Nadu, Nitqueen nodded approvingly, clearly proud. Johan opened his Pokédex and saw that Blizzard had indeed appeared in Vulpix's move list, though its entry was faint and unrefined. Ooh, Vulpix sheepishly scratched its head. Johan sighed deeply. Mystery solved. This mess was the combined effort of all 4 Pokémon. While he was pleased with their progress, Haunter learning Ice Punch and Vulpix mastering Blizzard, did it have to come at this cost? Breathing out slowly, he asked. So, where are we sleeping tonight? Hearing this, Haunter cracked its knuckles. Caca! Blue ghostly flames ignited on its claws. Nitqueen's eyes lit up, and she followed suit with Fire Punch. Tinkadink's hammer morphed into a makeshift shovel, and Vulpix's psychic powers flared to life. Wait! Johan stopped them. Let me take a picture first. With that, click, he snapped a photo of the snowman. Then, rolling up his sleeves and grabbing a spatula from the kitchen, he swept his gaze across the Pokémon. All right, time to clean up. Sino region, Celestic town. No snow, huh? Cynthia stepped outside, stretching out her hand only to find no snowflakes falling. A hint of disappointment crossed her face. Gar-com. Lu-si. Garchomp and Lucario, each carrying snowman building tools, exchanged puzzled looks. She looked so sad. What do we do? Lucario glanced at Garchomp. No idea. Cynthia's phone buzzed, interrupting their silent panic. Picking it up, she saw a message from Johan. It was short. Grain in the field, snowman. Attached was a picture of the snowman Vulpix and Tinkeradink had built. Cynthia's disappointment vanished instantly, replaced by a bright smile. Zooming in on the snowman's face, she took a screenshot and replied with 2 words. He eats cabbage, so ugly. Snowman Johan face close-up.jpg. Stretching lazily, Cynthia turned to Garchomp and Lucario, now looking hopeful. I'm thirsty. Garchomp and Lucario immediately snapped to attention, rushing off to fetch her some water. Make it hot. Tuesday, cloudy skies. Nitqueen, you're a grown Pokémon now. The road ahead is yours to walk. On the rooftop of Johan's building, the setting sun painted the entire city with a golden hue, draping it in a thin veil of twilight. The warm colors illuminated Nitqueen's face, turning it a vibrant orange. Nitqueen looked up. A few tail-loaf flew by in pairs overhead. However, Nitqueen didn't react the way she would have when she first arrived. Instead of showing aggression, she quietly lowered her head and gazed at Johan. Nearby, Haunter and the others displayed mixed emotions. Caca, B. Haunter retained its mischievous grin, giving Nitqueen a thumbs up. Vulpix looked reluctant, its eyes shimmering with tears as it bit its lip and waved gently. Ooh! Tinkeradink was the most straightforward. It stepped forward, intending to pat Nitqueen's arm, but realizing it couldn't reach, it settled for her knee instead. Chew. Big one, eat lots of food. Johan smiled as he walked forward and patted Nitqueen on the shoulder. You become a terrifyingly strong Pokémon now. Go climb to greater heights. When you reach the top, you'll see an entire forest. Don't stay hung up on just one tree. Go back and don't think too much. Just give him a solid beating. Then tell him, the old me you ignored, the current me you can't afford. This kind of self-empowerment was perfect for rebuilding confidence. Just like how he told himself he was handsome every morning in the mirror. And look at him now, at best Steven was on equal footing with him. No do. Nitqueen nodded resolutely and stepped forward, giving Johan a strong hug. Okay. Johan blushed and awkwardly patted her shoulder. No do. Letting go of Johan, Nitqueen's confidence was reignited. Well, until we meet again. With a soft sigh, Johan prepared to recall Nitqueen into her luxury ball. Wait. Could you hand this to gym leader Giovanni for me later? Before recalling her, Johan handed Nitqueen a piece of paper. No do. Although Nitqueen couldn't understand the dense writing on it, she nodded firmly. With that, Johan recalled her into the luxury ball and handed it to the waiting Delibird courier. He discreetly slipped the Delibird a few energy cubes. Delibird's face immediately lit up. Belly. It waved at Johan and the others before flapping its wings and heading toward the Kanto region. Johan and his Pokémon stood on the rooftop, waving goodbye until the courier disappeared from sight. Truthfully, through spending so many days together, there was undeniably some attachment. But Nitqueen had her path, and Johan had his. Just as Johan turned to console the 3 little ones, he found they had already moved on from the sadness of parting. They were laughing as they walked downstairs, debating what Johan might cook for dinner. Wait, just like that? Halfway down, Haunter noticed Johan wasn't following. Floated back and tugged at him. Caw. Hurry up, old man, or I'm taking over the kitchen. Johan twitched. So I'm just a heartless cooking tool to you? As Haunter dragged him along, Johan couldn't help but ask. Seriously, you guys aren't feeling sentimental at all? Haunter blinked, confused. Caca. Sentimental? Why? We'll see her again. Ha. So philosophical? Haunter grinned widely, its red tongue flapping. Caca. We made a promise with Nitqueen. A promise? Johan raised an eyebrow. Haunter dramatically pointed to the sky, cackling gleefully. Ka. Ka. We promised. To meet at the summit. Johan. Wait, do you guys understand what it means to promise a summit meeting with Nitqueen? Are we challenging Giovanni? Seeing Johan's shocked expression, Haunter thumped its chest confidently. Ka. Don't worry, I'll carry us to victory. Wednesday morning. Johan went about his usual routine, bringing the little ones to school. He had an afternoon class, but the lesson plan was already prepared. The session went as usual, packed with students, somewhat tedious content, yet not a single person dozed off. Afterward, he stopped by the administration office to request 2 days off. Technically, a research instructor like Johan or Professor Cosmo could disappear for a couple of days without raising eyebrows, provided they weren't scheduled to teach or handle important tasks. However, Johan's case was a bit unique, given that he also ran the Pokémon psychology consultation room. To his surprise, Principal Minjiang approved the leave immediately without asking for a reason. Johan's online popularity had skyrocketed recently. He was becoming something of a poster child for Rustboro Pokémon Academy. With no pressing obligations, Minjiang saw no reason to deny his request. Still, he reminded Johan to return before Saturday's semifinals. Although the Elite 8 matches had concluded less than 3 days ago, the office had already been inundated with media inquiries. Many wanted to live-stream Saturday's semifinals and even hoped to arrange an exclusive interview with Johan. Several companies had offered sponsorship deals, requesting only a small logo on Johan's outfit during the broadcast. The Academy declined the sponsorships outright. Rustboro Pokémon Academy didn't lack funds, being backed by the Hoenn League and giants like Devon Corporation. However, they welcomed media coverage, believing it could attract more talented students. Even though Johan downplayed his chances in the semifinals, Minjiang insisted that even just showing up was better than not attending. And so Johan secured his leave. Wednesday evening. As the sun set once again, Johan boarded a flight to the Sino region with his 3 little ones. It was his first trip outside of Hoenn since arriving in this world. To say he wasn't a little excited would be a lie. And he wasn't the only one. Haunter had its entire face pressed against the window, tongue out, inadvertently giving the airline a free glass cleaning service. Ease up. Don't corrode the glass, Johan warned. At this altitude, even the tiniest gap could lead to depressurization, or worse. Slurp. Haunter retracted its tongue, nodding in understanding. Vulpix lay on Johan's lap, its expression unusually solemn. Owu. The plane depressurizes, grab the oxygen masks first. The engines fail, latch onto Haunter. If there's an explosion, use Blizzard to douse the flames, we might survive. Listening to Vulpix's muttering, Johan broke into a cold sweat. No need to prep for disaster so thoroughly. Where's Tinkeradink? Noticing Tinkeradink was missing, Johan scanned the cabin. He found the little one holding its hammer, standing by the emergency exit with a curious tilt of its head. Chew. Suddenly, Tinkadink's eyes lit up. It leapt toward the door handle. Johan! Haunter, get Tinkeradink back here. He hurled Haunter in Tinkadink's direction. Thankfully, Haunter reacted quickly, grabbing the airborne Tinkeradink just in time and bringing it back. Facing Johan's stern glare, Tinkeradink chuckled sheepishly. Choo-choo! That door's metal seemed top-notch. Johan! He promptly strapped Tinkeradink to his seat with a safety belt, ensuring it wouldn't wreak havoc. Planes in the Pokémon world were far sturdier than those in his previous life, made of high-quality metals. After all, in the skies, wild flying types were a constant threat. And that was on a good day. A worse scenario might involve an encounter with a certain cameraman deity, or a literal meteorite containing an alien being that just so happened to be Rayquaza's dinner, which Rayquaza might still lose to. Don't worry too much, lad. That little one won't be able to open it. A bespectacled, wiry old man seated nearby chuckled. This plains metal was crafted from special black gold excavated in Orberg City, extremely sturdy. Plus, the air valves are sealed during flight. No ordinary Pokémon could breach it. Oh. Johan nodded in realization. No wonder the flight attendants hadn't intervened earlier. The old man coughed lightly. This old geezer had a hand in that matter. A big shot involved in aircraft development? Before Johan could respond, the old man clicked his tongue. My Snorlax accidentally opened the door once. After that, they made sure no one else could. Johan, so that's what he meant by having a hand in it? Wait, you actually released Snorlax on a plane. How much did you have to pay? Johan asked, curious. The old man waved dismissively. Just a few $100,000. Kaka. Sigma, LLL. As the flight continued smoothly, Johan chatted casually with the quirky elder. Kaka. That's Mount Coronet. Haunter's excited cry drew the attention of Johan and his little ones to the window. First time in Sino, huh, lad? If you don't mind, the old geezer could host you for the night, the old man offered. Johan smiled and shook his head. Thanks, but I've got a friend picking me up. The elder didn't press the matter further. As the plane prepared to land, Johan asked, By the way, I didn't catch your name, sir. The old man grinned warmly. Just call me Mitch. Mitch Berlitz. Berlitz. Hearing that surname, Johan froze in shock. The Berlitz family. A 200-year legacy, the wealthiest family in Sino. They were practically on par with the Stone family in Hoenn. Plane landed smoothly in Hartome City. Exiting the airport, Johan immediately spotted a Spiritome holding a sign with his name. Beside it stood Cynthia, her face adorned with a warm smile. Cynthia remained as striking as ever, clad in her familiar black trench coat, her waterfall-like golden hair flowing elegantly. Her modest high heels complemented her unique aura, making her stand out in any crowd. Wait, is that Miss Cynthia? Miss Cynthia's here to pick someone up? Could it be Professor Rowan? Passengers disembarking from the flight started streaming out, catching sight of Cynthia waiting at the terminal. Two individuals approached her. One was an older man with white hair, glasses, and a smile tinged with mild surprise. The other was a young man around the same age as Cynthia, dressed in a sharp black suit. His intellectual and composed demeanor exuded scholarly charm. And the crowd had to admit, this guy was incredibly handsome. When they saw the older man, many onlookers had a moment of realization. So, it's Mr. Mitch Berlitz. The Berlitz family wasn't just the wealthiest in Sino. Many members of the family were also researchers. For example, the recently graduated Dr. Berlitz, an assistant to Professor Rowan, had undoubtedly worked closely with Cynthia, another of Rowan's protégés. However, after Mitch Berlitz exchanged a few pleasantries with Cynthia and the young man before leaving, the onlookers were left stunned. Cynthia wasn't here to pick up Mitch Berlitz. She was here for this young man. A few younger onlookers, realizing they'd stumbled upon some potentially explosive news, discreetly pulled out their phones to snap photos of the pair. This was headline material. But when they checked the pictures they'd taken, their expressions shifted to disbelief. Haunter. In every shot, regardless of the angle or timing, the photos featured Haunter instead of the intended subjects. Each image depicted Haunter in different poses, grinning, sticking its tongue out, flashing peace signs, or donning sunglasses. What the? They weren't imagining things. This was actual ghostly interference. And it wasn't just one person experiencing this. Every single person who tried to take a photo ended up with the same results. Ooh, Vulpix leapt into Cynthia's arms the moment it saw her, nuzzling affectionately against her. Cynthia smiled warmly, her tone gentle. "You're here." Johan nodded, smiling back. "Long time no see." His gaze shifted to the Spiritome holding a sign at Cynthia's feet, and he chuckled. "Spiritome, you've gotten prettier since I last saw you." He turned back to Cynthia, and they exchanged a knowing smile. FSS/FSS///////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// Shall we go? Cynthia suggested, noting the growing attention from bystanders. Johan glanced around. Indeed, several people were already pulling out their phones, likely trying to snap a picture. However, realizing Haunter was nowhere to be seen, Johan's expression grew a bit peculiar. Everything's fine, he said with a chuckle. Kanto Region, Team Rocket HQ. Boss! Domino burst into Giovanni's office, practically breathless. Giovanni frowned, his tone laced with disapproval. Domino! Leaning over, hands on her knees, she panted, Boss! Nitqueen, she beat up Nidoking. Giovanni raised an eyebrow, genuinely caught off guard. It was the first time Domino had seen such surprise on his face. Say that again? Giovanni asked for confirmation. Taking a deep breath, Domino repeated. The Nitqueen that just returned from Johan's care beat up the Nidoking that dumped her. He's still kneeling there. Giovanni. Pokémon fights weren't uncommon, especially among Nitqueen and Nidoking, whose species often had internal disputes. But Giovanni remembered correctly that Nidoking was significantly stronger than Nitqueen. And now it was the one getting pummeled? How is Nitqueen? What's her current state? Giovanni asked. Domino quickly handed over a report. This is the data we gathered after her return, compared to her original stats. Her growth is quite significant. After skimming the document, Giovanni chuckled. Significant was an understatement. He quickly noticed that while Nitqueen's overall physical stats had improved, the power of her moves had skyrocketed. Move mastery? Let's take a look. Giovanni stood, his Persian lazily stretching before padding after him. The pair, along with Domino, headed to a lush habitat simulation area within the base. From a distance, they spotted Nitqueen standing tall, hands on her hips, exuding dominance. In front of her knelt a battered Nidoking, its expression a mix of disbelief and resignation. Around them were other members of the Nido family, Nitqueen, Nidoking, Nidoran, and Nidorino, watching the spectacle. Giovanni stopped a fair distance away, a smile forming on his lips. I see now. With his innate Viridian aura, Giovanni could sense the shift in Nitqueen's demeanor from afar. Domino, who had followed him closely, seemed puzzled. What's the reason for this, boss? Giovanni turned to leave, clearly uninterested in interfering with Nitqueen's affairs. Didn't you notice? Notice what? Domino asked, confused. It's confidence, Domino. Pokémon were fascinating creatures with diverse abilities, traits, and characteristics. And they were profoundly influenced by emotions, both their own and their trainers. When a Pokémon felt anger, excitement, or an unwavering sense of purpose, it could unleash extraordinary power. Nitqueen's biggest transformation was her newfound confidence. Confidence in her strength, her abilities, even her appearance. Giovanni's Viridian aura even picked up on Nitqueen's inner monologue. I'm terrifyingly strong now. You're out of my league. This self-assured mindset left Giovanni slightly amused. What exactly did Johan do to instill this? If Giovanni could arrange for Johan to provide similar confidence coaching to every Team Rocket member's Pokémon before their missions, not even to the same extent, just half the results Nitqueen showed would be enough. What heights could Team Rocket's strength reach? What a talent! A bona fide, invaluable talent. He's practically a walking multi-purpose buff for Pokémon. Domino, Giovanni said suddenly. Yes, sir. Domino responded after a delayed beat. Elevate Johan's clearance to executive level. Executives were second only to Giovanni himself within Team Rocket. Even among themselves, executives couldn't freely access one another's files. Yes, sir. Internally, Domino couldn't help but wonder, does Johan even know he's considered a Team Rocket executive? Also, transfer this Nitqueen to Squad 3. Her potential is remarkable. Yes, sir. As Domino turned to carry out his orders, she hesitated, then produced another document, handing it to Giovanni. Boss, this is the expense report Johan sent back with Nitqueen. It details her consumption over the past few days. Her expression turned strange as she spoke. It was quite the list. Giovanni scanned it briefly, his mouth twitching. Domino adjusted her glasses and added quietly, Boss, Johan suggested converting it to cash. Exiting Hartome City's airport, Johan followed Cynthia into the parking lot. Hartome was one of Sinoa's major cities, renowned as the most livable city in the region. Despite hosting a ghost-type gym, the city radiated a warm, inviting atmosphere. Its mild climate and excellent environment made it highly desirable. Additionally, Hartome was home to Sinoa's largest contest hall. Are we driving? Johan glanced at the lot as they walked. Cynthia shook her head. Then, she smiled, retrieving a pokeball. In a flash of red light, a massive, menacing Garchomp materialized under the street lamp. Frankly, seeing a Garchomp out at night could easily scare most people. Roar! Garchomp shot Johan a cold glance. Caw-caw! Haunter floated over to greet its old acquaintance, easing some of Garchomp's icy demeanor. Johan, on the other hand, felt a chill run down his spine. Wait, are we flying on Garchomp? He murmured. Roar! Garchomp's gaze turned even frostier, its scythe-like claws gleaming ominously under the lamplight. Cynthia tilted her head, her eyes dancing with mischief. One bead of sweat slid down Johan's temple. The idea of flying on Garchomp with Cynthia was admittedly tempting. But, are you sure Garchomp won't throw me off midway? One look at Garchomp's expression quickly answered that question. No, I'd probably die on the spot. Cynthia's melodious laughter rang out. Retrieving another pokeball, she released a plump, cheerful Dragonite. Rawr! Johan blinked in surprise. Dragonite? Approaching, Cynthia patted Dragonite's soft, round belly. Dragonite will take you. Johan breathed a sigh of relief. Compared to Garchomp, Dragonite was far more approachable. Slipping it 2 poke blocks, he quickly won over the gentle dragon. Rawr, rawr! Cold wind howled. In the distance, the towering peak of Tinkeratu loomed, stretching across the Sino region, shrouded in misty white fog and snowfall. High above, 2 figures flew from Hartome City towards Celestic Town. The upcoming Pokémon Researchers Conference was set to take place in Celestic Town, nestled halfway up Tinkeratu. The Celestic Historical Research Center was to serve as the conference venue. Perched on Dragonite's back, Johan barely felt the biting chill, thanks to the considerate Pokémon shielding him from the rushing wind with its body. Haunter, however, was delighted, clinging to Johan's back as it eagerly peered around. Its excitement over exploring Sino for the first time was evident. Johan's expression, on the other hand, was far less composed. His face was tense, his lips pressed firmly together, and his complexion was slightly pale. Riding on Garchomp nearby, Cynthia noticed Johan's unusual demeanor. She tilted her head slightly, a hint of curiosity in her gaze. Are you afraid of heights? She asked. Johan turned his head stiffly, his movements betraying a touch of defiance. He shook his head resolutely. He wasn't afraid of heights. He had spent plenty of time looking out of the plane window earlier. Cynthia tilted her head further, puzzled. Haunter, meanwhile, let out a mischievous cackle, patting Johan on the back before extending a claw toward Cynthia. Claw shot forward like a bolt. Caw-caw. He's afraid of speed. Cynthia raised an eyebrow, a spark of understanding lighting her expression. Johan wasn't afraid of flying. He was afraid of going fast. The last time he'd been in a high-speed situation, riding with an officer Jenny, he'd barely been able to speak the whole trip. Speed, huh? Cynthia studied Johan for a moment before she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Even Garchomp turned to snicker, its jagged maw curling into a toothy grin. Roar, Sigma. What a weakling. Seeing Cynthia laughing uncontrollably, Johan glared at her. Don't all men hate going too fast? He protested inwardly. Cynthia smirked playfully and teased. If you keep glaring at me, I might ask Dragonite to use extreme speed. Roar. Dragonite blinked, tilting its head. The blood drained from Johan's face. He quickly produced a few poke blocks from his pocket, offering them to Dragonite as a peace offering. Roar. Dragonite happily accepted, thrilled to earn an unexpected snack. Cynthia tapped her lips thoughtfully, her gaze playful as she looked up at the misty moon. Now I feel like eating your cooking. Taking advantage of the situation, huh? Johan thought. Still, he had no choice but to nod obediently. Can't argue with the person controlling the dragon. All right then, Cynthia said with a satisfied smile. Dragonite, let's slow down a bit. She gave Garchomp a gentle pat as well. Roar. Garchomp shot Johan a disdainful glance. Weakling. Johan pretended not to notice Garchomp's scorn. You'd better hope I don't catch a dragon Pokémon one day, he thought to himself. I'll do nothing but spam dragon dance in front of you. With their pace slowing, Johan finally felt he could breathe a bit easier. Though their speed had decreased slightly, they were still making good time towards Celestic town. As they neared Incornet, soft, glittering snowflakes began to drift down, swirling gently in the wind like tiny feathers. Cynthia reached out to catch one, her eyes lighting up with delight. It's snowing. Johan glanced upward. While snow on an Incornet was common, it typically fell on the mountain's far side due to the wind. For it to snow here outside the usual range was somewhat rare. It really is, Johan remarked. Caw. Haunter extended its head beyond Dragonite's protective airflow, opening its mouth wide to gulp down the icy air. Smacked its lips thoughtfully. Caw. Tastes different from snow created by Pokémon moves. Johan shot Haunter a glance but wasn't surprised. Haunter had already sampled snow conjured by Vulpix's blizzard before, so it was no surprise it would compare. Look, Cynthia said, pointing ahead. In the distance, tiny pinpricks of light like fireflies dotted the mountainside. As they drew closer, the lights revealed themselves to belong to a small settlement nestled on a flat plateau halfway up the mountain. Celestic town. With a soft thud, Johan's feet touched the ground once more. He exhaled deeply, relieved to be off Dragonite's back. He gave the Pokémon a grateful pat, then pulled out a generous handful of Pokeblocks. Roar! Dragonite happily accepted the treats and flew off in high spirits. Johan glanced around. Compared to Hartome City or Rustboro City, Celestic Town was far less developed. Its charm lay in its close connection to nature. Its air was crisper, its atmosphere quieter, and its snowy surroundings gave it a serene, almost otherworldly beauty. However, a practical concern arose. Where do I stay? In a bustling city like Hartome, accommodations would be easy to find. But in this remote town, was there even a Pokémon Center? Why are you just standing there? Cynthia's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She waved him over. Oh, okay, Johan replied, following her. They arrived at a wooden house that exuded a warm, rustic charm. Is this Cynthia's home? Though he had visited the location countless times in the games, this was his first time seeing it in real life. Cynthia pushed open the door and stepped inside. Her Pokeballs automatically opened. Garchomp and Lucario took their positions at the entrance, their gazes sharp and unyielding as they scrutinized Johan. Why aren't you coming in? Cynthia peeked back, her expression puzzled as she held out a pair of guest slippers. Johan mustered a stiff smile and cautiously approached the door under the watchful eyes of Garchomp and Lucario. As he passed them, he pulled out 2 small handfuls of premium poke blocks. These weren't ordinary poke blocks but ones Johan had crafted based on his and Wallace's combined expertise. "Let's call it a peace offering," Johan said with a grin. The 2 Pokémon exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. Johan slipped into a pair of guest slippers. Why are these slippers so adorable? He wondered, looking down at the pink, chubby Jigglypuff design. Inside, he released his own Pokémon from their Pokeballs. Vulpix and Tinkeradink immediately joined the others in exploring the cozy space. Haunter, meanwhile, had already cozied up next to Garchomp to watch TV. Chew! Tinkeradink, spotting Lucario, lit up with excitement and scurried over, clutching its little hammer. Eevee! Seeing Vulpix, and Eevee also dashed over, its eyes sparkling. V! Oh! Soon, the room filled with playful noises as the Pokémon frolicked together. Johan settled onto the sofa, taking in his surroundings. Cynthia's home was spacious yet cozy, with a predominantly wooden interior. Decorations were simple but tasteful, with drawings and stickers adorning the walls, adding a touch of warmth. FSS. Hartome floated over, carefully balancing a steaming cup of water, which it offered to Johan. Johan chuckled. Thank you. FSS /////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// left-hand flower and sprinkling them into the cup. Johan. He watched the petals swirl and sink, dyeing the water a light lavender. Tea? But wasn't Roserade's left-hand flower poisonous? After a moment of hesitation, Johan cautiously took a sip. To his surprise, the flavor was delicate and pleasant, a subtle sweetness mingling with floral notes and just a hint of bitterness. "It's delicious," he said, smiling at Roserade as he patted its head. "Rose?" Roserade's eyes widened in astonishment, clearly touched by the compliment. Just as Johan was relaxing, a faint hiss and the sight of black smoke billowing from the kitchen snapped him to attention. "Something's burning." He bolted toward the kitchen, mentally berating himself. "How could I be so careless? I forgot who's in there." 2 minutes later, Cynthia stood at the kitchen door, her face smudged with soot, holding a spatula in her hand. Behind her, Johan stuck a paper sign to the door. "Cynthia and Haunter are banned from entering. Kaka. Sigma, LLL." Johan turned to Cynthia, his expression stern. "You?" But the weight of Garchomp and Lucario's glares stopped him mid-sentence. "Should go take a shower first," he said, swallowing his frustration. "Okay," Cynthia replied meekly. Far away in a fragmented world, a colossal being stirred, its glowing crimson eyes filled with a rare hint of curiosity. This time the sensation feels closer. Half an hour later, Cynthia had changed into an adorable Pikachu-themed pajama set, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders. She sat down at the dining table, her eyes lighting up as she gazed at a steaming bowl of miso ramen. Leaning forward, she took a deep breath, inhaling the fragrant aroma. "The ingredients were a bit limited, so I could only make this," Johan said, placing a pair of chopsticks by her bowl. Cynthia, however, seemed to be in her own world. "It smells amazing. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to." Johan rubbed his temples, shaking his head. She hadn't heard a word. Clapping her hands together, Cynthia said with a smile, "Let's eat." She took a sip of the soup, her eyes immediately narrowing in contentment, the corners of her mouth lifting into a smile. As expected. "This is delicious." Cynthia beamed at him. Johan chuckled. Years of living alone had taught him that knowing how to make a good bowl of ramen was a survival skill. "By the way, there are plenty of spare rooms here," Cynthia said after a moment. "Feel free to pick whichever one you like." Johan raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's okay? They were, after all, a man and a woman living under the same roof. Cynthia gave him a confused look, tilting her head slightly. Oh. Johan glanced at the hallway, recalling the deadly glares from earlier. Right. With Garchomp and Lucario here, what could possibly go wrong? If anything, it felt like he was the one in more danger. After a brief pause, he pointed to the room next to Cynthia's. I'll take that one. Sure, Cynthia replied nonchalantly, focusing once more on her ramen. Johan rose to his feet, deciding it was best to handle setting up his room himself. He called Haunter, Vulpix, and Tinkeradink to help him. When he opened the door to his chosen room, he froze. Right in the center of the opposite wall was a large photograph of Cynthia as a child, sharing an ice cream with a little gibble. Ha! Johan blinked in surprise. Wait. Cynthia's hurried voice echoed as she realized which room he'd chosen. Footsteps quickly approached. By then, however, Johan had already taken a closer look at the room. The walls were adorned with countless photographs. There was a picture of young Cynthia hugging Gibble tightly. Another showed her walking to school with Gibble at her side. Yet another captured her posing with Gibble, Riolu, and Abudu. In one particularly dynamic shot, she commanded Gibble in battle, her expression fierce and determined. It was immediately clear. This wasn't a bedroom, it was a study. Bookshelves lined the walls, crammed with volumes, some of them clearly rare and ancient. On the desk, Johan noticed a photo in a cute frame. It was the one they had taken together under the eternal tree back in Sitopolis City. Cynthia's cheeks flushed red as she reached him, grabbed his arm, and pulled him out of the room before shutting the door behind her. That's my study, she said awkwardly. Later, Johan finished organizing a different room for himself. Vulpix and Evie were already bouncing around on the soft bed, rolling and playing. Meanwhile, Haunter hung upside down from the ceiling, glancing around. Caw. This room is huge. In fact, the guest room was almost as large as the entire apartment Johan had rented in Hoenn. When Johan stepped out of the room, however, he was greeted by the sight of Garchomp's razor-sharp claws and Lucario's piercing stare. Lu. Both Pokémon exuded a silent threat. Dare to speak a word about the study, and those childhood photos didn't just feature Cynthia, they included them as well in their most adorably vulnerable moments. Johan glanced between them and smirked. Oh, wasn't it easy to deal with creatures like this? He turned his head toward his room and called out casually, Haunter, Garchomp wants to watch Foam Mouse Adventures with you. And Tinkeradink, he added. Lucario said it would teach you how to use Swords Dance. Garchomp and Lucario. Both Pokémon exchanged bewildered looks. Did we say that? We didn't, right? Caca. Haunter floated through the wall, grinning at Garchomp with a mischievous expression. Tinkeradink, meanwhile, ran out holding its hammer, eyes wide with excitement as it looked up at Lucario. Choo-choo. Really? You'll teach me? Lucario sighed, gesturing for Tinkeradink to follow. Haunter flopped onto the couch next to Garchomp, pulling out a phone. Caw, watch this. Garchomp tilted its head. What? Haunter's body morphed, forming the rough silhouette of a Foam Mouse character, complete with exaggerated features. Its grin, however, remained as menacing as ever. Caw. How's this? Foam Ghost Mouse. Garchomp shook its head stiffly. It's ugly. Haunter's eyes narrowed. Oh, you dare? Caw. Watch closely. It began morphing again, shifting into various forms, Cloyster, Metagross, Jigglypuff, Clefable, Giratina. As the night deepened, the house grew quiet. Reflections danced in mirrors, windows, and even the surface of water glasses and phones. If someone pieced together each fleeting glimpse, they would see a shadowy figure, a massive presence spanning the reflections in its entirety. A pair of crimson eyes flickered to life in the distorted glass, carrying a mix of curiosity and contemplation. In Johan's room, Haunter twitched in its sleep, rubbing its eyes before slowly opening them. Caca! Why did it suddenly feel so cold? In Cynthia's room, Garchomp splayed out on the floor like a giant X, and Lucario, cross-armed and leaning against the door in a protective stance, both opened their eyes simultaneously. Gra! Lu! The two Pokémon glanced at each other, silently confirming their unease. Garchomp had sensed an immense surge of dragon-type energy, while Lucario had detected a malicious presence through its aura. Moving quietly, they cracked open the door to investigate. Just as they stepped out, Haunter poked its head through the opposite door. For a brief moment, the three Pokémon locked eyes across the dimly lit living room. Nothing seemed out of place. But none of them noticed Johan's phone glowing faintly on the bedside table. Who am I? I've always wanted to ask. How do I meet them again? Who am I? Who am I? Who are you? Text messages appeared on the screen, one after another. From within the reflections, a crimson eye blinked in astonishment. Moments later, another message appeared. Together we resist. Who art thou? If Johan were awake, he'd realize something strange. Compared to Mewtwo's sparse profile, which had no avatar, no IP, and no details, this new Together We Resist presence wasn't even tied to the device. The messages didn't come from the internet. They simply existed. Even if the phone was a blank piece of glass, the words would still appear. Who am I? I am Mewtwo. Together we resist, thou art strong. Who am I? I am the strongest. Together we resist, art thou jesting? Who am I, jest? What's that? Together we resist, where dost thou dwell? Mewtwo paused. That question felt familiar. Who am I? I remember. I'm in a container. Together we resist. In the Distortion world, Giratina stared at a small reflective shard, its head tilting like a slowpoke's in confusion. Who am I? Where are you? Together we resist. I am the Lord of Distortion. Where dost thou think I reside? Who am I? Speak normally. Together we resist. Dost thou not comprehend? Suddenly, Johan's phone emitted a faint sizzle, smoke curling up as the screen dimmed. All traces of the conversation disappeared. Haunter floated back into Johan's room, scratching its head. Glanced around, then looked at the bed. Johan was fast asleep, although his face was being squashed by Tinkat. Ink's foot. Vulpix lay curled in a ball, its icy fur likely turning the entire blanket cold. Caca! Everything seemed fine. Haunter yawned, drifting back to the ceiling. Elsewhere, in the depths of Team Rocket's headquarters, Mewtwo frowned, encased in its armored suit. The Lord of Distortion? Closed its eyes in thought. So that's why he has such powerful entities by his side. Its gaze flickered to the researchers bustling below. If only they knew what had just occurred. Meanwhile, in the Distortion world, Giratina scratched its head with a claw, deep in thought. Had it just been hacked by a creature in a jar? Looking around the vast, broken world it called home, Giratina let out a frustrated growl. If I can gain his help, maybe. As Johan slept soundly, a faint burning smell wafted through the room. In his dreams, he murmured, Haunter, please don't burn the house down. What he didn't know was that his ordinary phone had just endured an extraordinary encounter. Thursday morning, the town of Celestic was shrouded in a thin veil of mist. How strange. Johan glanced at his phone, which stubbornly refused to turn on, and frowned. Did the battery die? He looked toward Haunter. Realizing Johan's unspoken question, Haunter hastily raised its hands in mock innocence, vehemently shaking its head to declare its innocence. Thankfully, after plugging it in to charge, the phone booted up without issue. With Vulpix in his arms, Johan walked toward Cynthia's room. Since they had arrived late the previous night and stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning chatting over midnight ramen, they hadn't gotten much sleep. Are you up? Johan gently knocked on the door. Coming. A sleepy yawn filtered out from the room, followed by the sound of chaos. Bang! Gra! Lou! Evie! Amid a cacophony of thuds and cries, Cynthia eventually opened the door, her hair slightly disheveled. Under the watchful eyes of Garchomp and Lucario, Johan scratched his head awkwardly and explained, "I wasn't sure of the exact address, so..." It was then that Cynthia suddenly remembered. Today was the day of the Pokémon Researcher Conference. Slam. The door closed again. "Give me a moment," Cynthia called out. Johan and Haunter exchanged glances before deciding to wait outside. It had snowed all night, and the entire town was now cloaked in a pristine blanket of white. "Oh, chew." Vulpix and Tinkeradink leapt gleefully into the snow, kicking up flurries as they dashed through the drifts. For Vulpix, the scene evoked nostalgic memories of Alola's snowy peaks. For Tinkeradink, it was a first-time marvel, a wonderland of snow-covered hills. Haunter, in contrast, crossed its arms and shook its head in mock disapproval, exuding an air of exaggerated maturity. Caw. Kids these days. Unlike me, an experienced elder. Johan gave it a side eye. The next second, flat, a snowball exploded against Haunter's face. Caw. So that's how it is? You forced my hand. With mischievous glee, Haunter joined the snowy battlefield. It wasn't long before Cynthia's Pokémon joined the fray as well, one after another stepping outside. What awaited them, however, was an onslaught of snowballs. Garchomp in particular seemed to have been singled out. No sooner had it stepped out than it found itself under a giant shadow. Gra tilted its head upward in confusion. Gra! Sigma, LLL. Haunter stood atop a snow mound, hoisting an enormous snowball over its head, a wicked grin on its face. Thwack! The snowball struck with enough force to bury Garchomp completely. For a moment, the snowy field was still. Haunter hesitated, muttering to itself, "Caw. Surely you're not going to lose your temper over this, right?" Then, with a deafening roar, Garchomp erupted from the snow, kicking off a high-speed chase across the field. What followed was a chaotic spectacle of Dragon Rush snowplow and Haunter's desperate great escape. After weaving through streets blanketed with snow, Johan and Cynthia arrived at the Celestic Historical Research Institute by 8:30 a.m. The institute, headed by Cynthia's grandmother, was expansive. Its front courtyard was a wide-open square paved with white bricks, the snow already cleared away. Behind the institute lay a vast forest, stretching up to the slopes of Tinkeradink. Scholars and experts from various fields were already gathered at the institute's entrance, conversing in small groups and sharing their latest research findings. "You're here?" Professor Carolina greeted them warmly, lifting her briefcase as she approached. "This is Professor Oak," she said, gesturing to a familiar figure. Professor Oak. The legendary researcher himself, a towering figure in the field of Pokémon studies, stood before them with his trademark genial smile. "Ah, you must be Cynthia. Professor Carolina's spoken highly of you, a brilliant researcher and an exceptional trainer," Oak said, his tone as warm as his demeanor. "You're too kind," Cynthia replied with a polite smile. Oak's gaze then shifted to Johan. "And this young man is?" "Johan," he introduced himself with a smile. Although Johan had spoken to Carolina over the phone a few times, this was his first time meeting her in person. As for Professor Oak, the extent of their prior interaction was limited to Oak's brief positive comment on one of Johan's research papers. Oak's expression lit up with recognition. "Ah, I thought so. Your paper was excellent. I've also heard about your collaborative research with Professor Carolina. Impressive work." Meanwhile, Carolina retrieved a few items from her briefcase, a document, a badge shaped like a pin, and a work ID, which she handed to Johan. "This is..." Johan glanced at the work ID, which read, "Researcher Johan." A researcher? For a moment, he was taken aback. Pin, an official league researcher badge, contained a chip storing key credentials. The document detailed the recent progress of their Milotic natural evolution study. Wait, I've been promoted to researcher status already? Lowering his voice, Johan leaned towards Cynthia and asked, "You knew about this in advance, didn't you?" Cynthia gave him a sly smile. Turning to Carolina, she asked, "Professor, where's my grandmother?" "She's inside. I'll catch up with you all later. I'm going to say hello to her first." With a quick apology to the two professors, Cynthia dashed inside. Over the course of the morning, Johan met several prominent figures in the Pokémon research community. Among them were Elm from Johto, who specialized in Pokémon breeding and was Oak's student, and Burch from Hoenn, known for his work on Pokémon habitats. Kukui from Alola, already familiar with Johan from his masked royal persona, greeted him with warmth. Then there was Sycamore from Kalos, the heartthrob professor, whose research focused on mega evolution. To Johan's surprise, Sycamore showed great interest in his theories. It wasn't until later that Johan realized the connection. Sycamore's work on mega evolution closely intertwined with the bond between trainers and their Pokémon, a subject Johan had also explored. "If you ever get the chance, visit Kalos," Sycamore said with a grin. Johan smiled in return. "I'll definitely consider it." Conference officially began with a keynote speech by Professor Oak. His appearance drew thunderous applause from the audience. The subsequent sessions focused on sharing research findings, a realm in which Johan had little interest. Instead, he wandered the institute grounds with Haunter, Vulpix, and Tinkeradink in tow. When they reached the forest behind the institute, Haunter suddenly perked up. "Caw-caw. What's up?" Johan asked. Vulpix's ears twitched. Seemed to have picked up on something as well. The two Pokémon exchanged glances before darting deeper into the woods. Curious, Johan scooped up Tinkeradink and followed. The sound of a scuffle grew louder as they advanced. Finally, Johan spotted the source of the commotion. A boy of about 10 with short brown hair and a black jacket was locked in battle with a wild Pokémon. He gripped a wooden stick, his expression serious and focused. Standing in front of him was a fiery orange Pokémon with a flaming tail. Charmander! Johan froze, blinking in surprise. Was that Gary Oak? Or Blue? Given the Charmander, it had to be Blue. Professor Oak's grandson. Facing them was a menacing Stunky, its fur bristling and its back arched as it prepared to attack. Blue's strategy was simple but effective. Charmander Ember. While Charmander unleashed a burst of flames, Blue used the opportunity to swing his wooden stick at Stunky, drawing its attention away from his partner. Though his attack wasn't particularly damaging, it distracted the wild Pokémon long enough for Charmander's Ember to land a direct hit. Burned and panicked, Stunky yelped and fled into the woods. Blue let out a relieved sigh, dropping to the ground in exhaustion. "You did great," he said, patting Charmander on the head. Charmander chirped, sitting down beside him. Johan watched from a distance, observing Blue's youthful determination. The boy, still in the early stages of his journey, had a long way to go before becoming the trainer he was destined to be. Blue noticed Johan watching but said nothing. After a brief nod of acknowledgement, he stood, patted the dust off his jacket, and walked away with Charmander. Johan clicked his tongue, amused. Blue hadn't yet lost to Red or endured the champion for 5 minutes humiliation. This stage, his confidence and pride were still intact. Watching the boy disappear into the woods, Johan mused to himself. Time is running out for Giovanni. I wonder, can this world's Red and Blue really reach the summit by age 10? Caw-caw. Should we explore inside? Haunter was visibly intrigued, its curiosity sparked by the influence of Bubble Rodent's adventures. Though the area wasn't too far from the Sino Historical Research Institute, delving deeper into Nitqueen's forest meant potentially encountering wild Pokémon of considerable strength. Ooh, Vulpix shook its head, cautioning against the idea. What if we encounter danger? Meanwhile, Tinkeradink, cradled in Johan's arms, said nothing. Instead, it tilted its head, staring curiously at a specific part of the forest, its expression thoughtful. Before Johan could reply, Blue suddenly burst back onto the scene. The boy who had walked away confidently moments ago now seemed panicked, his forehead slick with sweat as if fleeing from a nightmare. Following closely behind him and his Charmander was a swarm of angry Stunky. As Blue approached Johan, he gasped between breaths. "Run! Get help! Help!" A single Stunky stench could pollute an area spanning kilometers, but an entire horde? If they reached the Sino Historical Research Institute, it would undoubtedly disrupt the Pokémon Researcher Conference and possibly require a venue change. Ignoring Blue's plea, Johan calmly addressed Tinkeradink. Tinkeradink. Chew. Tiny Pokémon understood immediately. It leapt gracefully out of Johan's arms, landing softly on the snowy ground. Despite the rapidly approaching Stunky, Tinkeradink remained unfazed. Smiled sweetly, casually twirling its hammer. The Stunky horde, however, didn't slow down. They didn't see Tinkeradink as a threat. What could a small, pink creature like it possibly do? Blue also couldn't comprehend Johan's actions. Why not use Haunter? That Pokémon looks far more capable in a fight than that baby thing. But what happened next made everyone, including Blue, Charmander, and the Stunky, realize their mistake. Johan's calm voice rang out. "Don't let them release any gas. No stink bombs allowed." Chew. Tinkeradink sprang into action. Its hammer lightly tapped the ground. Boom! A loud crash reverberated as the earth trembled slightly. A sharp spire of rock erupted from the center of the Stunky horde. Tone edge. There wasn't even time for the Stunky to cry out. They were all knocked out on the spot. Blue. He exchanged a dumbfounded look with Charmander, both equally stunned. That was terrifying. The only conscious creature left was the last in the line, a Skuntank, the evolved form of Stunky. Initially, Skuntank had only come to avenge its fallen Stunky allies. However, upon seeing the pink menace that had just taken out its group, it realized, "I made a mistake." Skuntank's tail curled defensively over its head, a sign that it was ready to release a toxic spray if needed. At the same time, it forced a smile, carefully retreating step by step. Tinkeradink, however, wasn't having it. Chew? Smiled, appearing adorable and harmless. But to Skuntank, the sight was downright horrifying. Without hesitation, Skuntank turned tail and bolted. Yet before it could escape, Tinkadink's frost-covered hammer came down. Wham! Skuntank collapsed instantly, knocked out cold. What just happened?" Blue muttered, still trying to process the scene. How could something so small wield such overwhelming power? Johan clapped a hand on Blue's shoulder and smiled as he walked toward the forest. "Wait, please wait," Blue called after him. Johan half-turned. "My name's Blue. May I know yours?" "Me." Johan chuckled, holding up the badge pinned to his chest. "Johan? Just a teacher." With a casual wave, Johan disappeared into the forest. "Johan, teacher?" Blue repeated, murmuring the name under his breath. Why does that sound so familiar? For now, he didn't have the answer. But one thing was certain, Johan's display had deeply impacted the young trainer's mindset. After a moment's pause, Blue and Charmander headed back to the Research Institute. Shortly after, the Stunky and Skuntank began regaining consciousness. Scree! A mournful wail echoed through the forest, startling flocks of bird Pokémon into the air. Meanwhile, Tinkeradink happily distributed stolen Pecha berries to Haunter, Vulpix, and Johan. "I didn't even know we picked these up," Johan muttered, staring at the berry in his hand. Turned out that during the battle, Tinkeradink had borrowed them from its defeated opponents. If the Stunky hadn't been so foul-smelling, it might have looted even more. Vulpix nibbled delicately at its berry. "Hoo! Are we really going on an adventure?" "Caw, caw, caw, caw. Yes, let's explore." Haunter was thrilled. Johan smiled wryly at their enthusiasm but focused on Tinkeradink, who led the way with its hammer over its shoulder. Because it seems Tinkeradink has found something interesting, Johan remarked. Initially, Johan had been hesitant to venture deeper into the forest, especially in a place as dangerous as Coronet. But Tinkadink's peculiar behavior had caught his attention. It had been fixated on a specific direction since their arrival. Choo-choo! Tinkeradink hummed a cheerful tune as it marched ahead like a little village chief, brimming with confidence. Suddenly, Tinkeradink stopped, its hammer glowing faintly. Its eyes lit up, and without hesitation it dashed forward. What awaited them was... help! Somebody help! A slightly pudgy man in a lab coat came running through the woods. He clutched a brown satchel and looked panicked, though not overly distressed. Trailing behind him were 3 small nose-pass-like figures, clearly mini-noses. Is that... Professor Burch? Johan was surprised to recognize him. If there had been Puccina and Zigzagoon chasing him, the situation would have been instantly clear. Upon noticing Johan, Burch grinned despite his predicament and called out, "Hey, handsome, could you lend a hand?" Tinkeradink didn't wait for instructions. Gleefully charged at the mini-noses. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The small hammer swung with wild precision, sending the mini-noses scattering like bowling pins. Professor Burch finally stopped running, bending over with his hands on his knees as he caught his breath. Thanks a lot. Professor Burch, what were you?" Johan began. But Burch scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Well, I couldn't resist checking out the wild Pokémon here on Coronet." Before Johan could respond, Tinkeradink cried out excitedly. Chew! Chew! It had pinned one of the mini-noses to the ground. Despite its struggles, the mini-nose couldn't budge. Tinkadink's eyes sparkled as it twirled its hammer, ready to strike. Trapped mini-nose suddenly emitted electrical sparks, seemingly calling for reinforcements. A second later, wham! A hefty Probopass, the evolved form of Nosepass, came flying into view. It had intended to pull the mini-noses toward it with its magnetic field, but instead it had been dragged into Tinkadink's grasp. The sight of the confused Probopass left Burch astonished. Fascinating! It really exists, a Probopass in a Coronet. Its magnetic field must be incredible. Professor, maybe focus on the danger first? Several minutes later, Tinkeradink emerged from the forest, cheerfully humming its familiar tune. Over its shoulder, it carried a mini-nose like a trophy. Haunter, meanwhile, had snagged one of Probopass's mustaches and was proudly wearing it as a disguise, stroking it like a sage. Vulpix trotted alongside them, its tail wrapped around a gleaming gold nugget. Ooh, look how shiny it is. Watching his Pokémon strut ahead, Johan sighed and rubbed his forehead. It's official. The outlaw squad has started their crime spree. Johan accompanied Professor Burch back near the research institute. Oh no, the conference! Burch exclaimed, finally realizing that the Pokémon Researcher Conference had already started. Anyway, Johan, thanks for the help. With that, Burch hurried toward the conference venue. Johan rubbed his nose, feeling relieved. Thankfully, he didn't try to hand me a Pokémon or anything. He glanced at his own party. Tinkeradink was spinning its hammer, ready to smash the mini-nose statue. Haunter was strutting around with its comical fake mustache, showing off to Vulpix. Yeah, best not to corrupt anyone else's Pokémon. Besides, even taking care of these 3 was already financially draining. Another one might leave him completely broke. Having nothing else to do, Johan decided to take a look at the conference. The first day of the Researcher Conference wasn't particularly engaging. It mostly involved researchers sharing their studies, challenges, and methods for overcoming them. Essentially, it was a series of long-winded stories, but rather dry ones. The second day, when researchers showcased their actual findings, was usually much more exciting. Johan pulled out his phone to check the time. However, a peculiar message caught his eye. Together we resist, chat with me. Ha! Johan turned his phone over, examining it closely. Is this thing broken? No notifications for incoming messages? He couldn't even recall adding someone with that name. And that tone? Interesting. Since it gave him an excuse to avoid the conference, Johan decided to respond. Sitting down on a clean step, he typed back. Grain in the field. Sorry, I've been adding a lot of people recently, might have missed yours. Who are you? Together we resist. Have I not said already? I am the Lord of Destruction, born of... Well, don't worry about how I was born. The Lord of Destruction? Johan's expression grew curious. Grain in the field. Greetings, Lord of Destruction. I am the Sky Sovereign, master of the true white dragon, guardian of order and creator of light's glory. In the Distortion world, Giratina stared at the tiny pane of glass before it. The words displayed left it momentarily stunned, and then its expression grew grave. Every authority the other party claimed, it could sense them. What the heck? This guy is seriously powerful. Meanwhile, Johan chuckled to himself, murmuring, Who doesn't know how to embellish? Think some Sino history knowledge can impress me? He recognized this exchange for what it was, middle schooler banter. Like kids proclaiming, there's no way Ultraman isn't real, or we all became the light that day. Ah, the youthful charm of being a little delusional. After all, who didn't have a phase like that? Men are just boys at heart. Together we resist. You're amazing. Grain in the field, likewise. Grain in the field. Anyway, jokes aside, what do you want to talk about? Or rather, why don't you tell me about yourself? The other party didn't reply immediately, so Johan took the chance to glance at Tinkeradink and the others. Tinkeradink, sweating profusely, was hammering away at the mini-nose statue, seemingly trying to incorporate it into its own hammer. However, the statue was nearly its size, and it was unclear how it intended to merge the two. Finally, the next message arrived. Together we resist. A friend of mine is in trouble. Long story. It's not really their fault. More details. Ultimately, though, it's the fault of the one who created them, granting them power but denying them freedom. And their two siblings are total cowards. Wow, a whole essay. Still, Johan grasped the essence of the story. A figure, likely a parental or creator entity, had 3 children. The eldest, feeling mistreated, was bitter and resentful, while the younger 2 were too timid to resist. Based on his experience, Johan suspected this friend was actually the person themselves. Role-playing as a Pokémon, huh? It wasn't the first time Johan had encountered someone venting their emotions through such a metaphor. Using their tone, phrasing, and details, he quickly profiled the individual. Person was likely strong-willed, capable, perhaps even outstanding in their abilities, but also highly prideful, potentially harboring a significant amount of jealousy. Their username, Together We Resist, further suggested a rebellious streak. Johan winced. Why does this remind me of someone? Oh, right. Sasuke. Another troubled soul. Johan sighed, then called out to Haunter. Haunter? Caca. Haunter turned inquisitively. Johan waved his phone. Your long-lost brother. After all, Haunter's nickname was Whirlpool Haunter. Haunter rolled its eyes, making a face. Together we resist. Should my friend resist? Grain in the field. By resist, do you mean fight the creator? Together we resist. When did I say that? I only meant to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Realizing the slip, the message was quickly retracted. Classic. Together we resist. My friend only wants to take back what's theirs. Isn't that fair? Johan nodded slightly. At least the person hadn't crossed the line into outright malevolence. There was hope yet. If the individual were truly malicious, Johan would have had to contact Officer Jenny. For now, he decided to guide them gently, aligning with their perspective first. Grain in the field, yes. In the Distortion world, Giratina froze, staring at the response for a long time before letting out a triumphant roar. Roar! The oppressive energy rippled across the dimension, further shattering its already broken terrain. But Giratina didn't care, it was ecstatic. Finally, someone understood it. Together we resist, then I need your help. There it is. Grain in the field, sure, no problem. But before Giratina could celebrate, Johan sent another message. Grain in the field on one condition. Together we resist. Name it. Grain in the field. From now on, you're forbidden from thinking about resistance, mentioning it, or even hinting at it. Together we resist. Grain in the field. You said the creator is powerful, right? If they're as formidable as you claim, do you think they'd overlook even a hint of rebellion? Giratina shivered. That's true. It had always proclaimed its defiance against Arceus, yet with Arceus' omnipotence, how could those thoughts have gone unnoticed? Grain in the field. Instead, focus on quietly growing stronger. Bide your time. When the moment comes, you'll make them see you in a new light. Grain in the field. As we say here, 30 years on the East Bank, 30 on the West. Never underestimate the underdog. Together we resist. Makes sense. A moment later, the username changed. Young Challenger makes sense. Johan couldn't help but chuckle. Quick learner. Conversation ended there, the chat window disappearing abruptly. Huh. Johan muttered, tapping his phone. Guess I really need a new one. League-provided phones aren't exactly top tier. Johan. Turning, he saw Cynthia standing nearby, looking puzzled. What are you doing here? I was handling something, Johan replied vaguely. Oh? Is this him? An elderly woman in a lab coat with short brown hair and a slight build emerged from behind Cynthia. Cynthia quickly whispered, My grandmother. Johan immediately stood, feeling inexplicably nervous. Professor Carolina, the older woman greeted warmly, her gaze assessing him with a mischievous glint. Quite handsome, she remarked, nodding. Johan exchanged an awkward glance with Cynthia. So, can you beat my granddaughter in a battle? Carolina suddenly asked, catching him off guard. Johan broke into a cold sweat. Probably not. Grandma, stop it, Cynthia groaned. Carolina chuckled, giving Johan a playful wink. Well then, young man, you'd better work on that. Cynthia quickly changed the subject. Grandma, Johan knows a lot about Sino's history. Oh. Carolina perked up, her interest piqued. Didn't you want to see the Institute's stone tablets and records, Johan? Cynthia prompted. Oh yes. Johan replied, catching her cue. Carolina's gaze lingered on them for a moment before she smiled knowingly. Come on in, then. She turned and headed inside, with Cynthia gesturing for Johan to follow. As Johan trailed behind, he wiped his forehead. Why does this feel like meeting the in-laws? Johan halted Tinkeradink and the others from fooling around and followed the group into the research institute. The Sino Historical Research Institute in Celestic Town was divided into two sections. The front housed translated historical documents, while the back contained relics from ancient times. Upon entering, Johan immediately noticed ancient stone pillars, crumbling statues, and stone tablets. He turned to Tinkeradink with a stern warning. We can't afford to replace any of this. Don't smash anything. Tinkeradink proudly patted the mini-nose statue on its shoulder, as if saying, I've already got what I need. Fair point, Johan said, relieved. No way these relics contain more precious metals than that statue. Walking with Cynthia and Professor Carolina, Johan passed through a corridor. On the walls were depictions of Sinoa's legendary dragons. Dialga, the Master of Time, and Palkia, the Master of Space. Haunter and Vulpix stopped to stare at the murals of the two dragons, seemingly mesmerized. Johan, however, wasn't fazed. One day, when these two clash, you'll know how terrifying they are. Meanwhile, Professor Carolina was explaining something to Cynthia in a language Johan didn't understand. Likely, she was sharing discoveries about the historical documents she'd been researching. The group walked further, passing shelves piled with ancient texts and data, and entered the deepest room of the institute. Hanging prominently in this chamber was a massive ancient mural. This mural? Johan stopped, taken aback. Unlike the previous depictions of Dialga and Palkia, which were modern recreations, this was an authentic ancient artifact. Do you recognize it? Professor Carolina asked with a smile. It depicts the Lake Guardians, the trio of Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, who represent wisdom, emotion, and willpower respectively. They reside in Sino's 3 lakes, Lake Acuity, Lake Verity, and Lake Valor. Cynthia and Professor Carolina exchanged a surprised glance. You actually know about them? Cynthia asked. Previously, Johan had downplayed his knowledge, saying he only knew a bit about Sino's history. But recognizing the Lake Guardians caught her off guard. Just a little, Johan replied modestly. Legend says they reside in the lakes, but no one has seen them for countless years. Whether they still dwell there remains uncertain, Carolina said, trailing off. They're there, Johan thought, but kept quiet. Professor Carolina didn't dwell on the subject and handed them a list. Since you know your history, could you and Cynthia help organize the documents on this list? We'll need them for the conference shortly. Of course, Cynthia replied, taking the list and walking over to Johan. 2 of them worked closely to comb through the documents. It became clear that Carolina's expertise in ancient history was leagues beyond Johan's casual knowledge. Even a single line of ancient text could inspire an entire thesis when analyzed with supporting evidence. Together, they compiled a large stack of materials. Could you help me move something else? Carolina called from the doorway. The entrance was a flat cart holding a finely crafted glass case. Inside were 2 radiant orbs displayed on a pedestal. The adamant orb and the lustrous orb. These will be sent to the Eterna Historical Museum for exhibition soon, Carolina explained. This conference is a rare chance for everyone to see them together. These orbs were the keys to summoning Dialga and Palkia. In the future, Team Galactic Cyrus would use these very orbs to summon the time and space dragons. If summoned now without control, the devastation could easily destroy half of Sino. Thankfully, no one currently knew how to use these orbs or about the importance of the spear pillar. Suddenly, Johan heard a soft rolling sound. He turned to see Tinkeradink staring at the adamant orb, utterly captivated. It had even abandoned its prized mini-nose statue. Oh no! Tinkeradink! Its eyes sparkled as it lunged toward the orb. Haunter! Vulpix! Johan shouted. Kaka! Oh! Understanding Johan's urgency, Haunter and Vulpix each grabbed one of Tinkadink's arms. However, their combined strength wasn't enough to stop Tinkadink's determination. To Johan's shock, Professor Carolina calmly opened the glass case, took out the adamant orb, and smiled at Tinkeradink. Do you like this, little one? Chew. Chew. Tinkeradink nodded eagerly, its eyes gleaming. Carolina chuckled. Not now. After the conference, maybe you can play with it for a bit. Seriously? Johan thought, stunned. Telling it to play with one of Sinoa's most dangerous artifacts? Tinkeradink pouted but nodded obediently, clutching its hammer tightly. Carolina patted its head affectionately. It's fine, Cynthia reassured Johan. I used to play with these when I was little, along with Gibble. What? Johan blinked in disbelief. Cynthia explained, it's part of the research. Sometimes, letting curious Pokémon or people interact with the orbs can reveal new secrets. Carolina added, the less deliberate the attempt, the more likely it is to uncover something unexpected. Uncovering the orb's mysteries was one of Carolina's main research goals. This practice was based on old legends. For instance, in the Sino anime, Ash and Dawn were allowed near the lustrous orb after vaguely sensing the presence of the Lake Guardians. Later, Johan and Cynthia helped Carolina push the orb display and accompanying documents to the main conference hall. This time, Johan stayed put and sat with Cynthia at the back of the hall, listening quietly. By evening, the conference had ended. Vulpix was curled up in Cynthia's lap, fast asleep. As for Johan, Cynthia lightly nudged the sleeping head on her shoulder. Johan stirred groggily, shivering slightly as he woke up. He turned to see Cynthia's Garchomp glaring down at him. Its cold, emotionless eyes conveyed a single thought: I will end you. Realizing he had been leaning on Cynthia while he slept, Johan sat bolt upright. Sorry. Cynthia chuckled softly, not saying a word. It's over? How long was I out? Johan asked. About an hour, Cynthia replied. Given his exhausting schedule, she was surprised he lasted as long as he did. Where's Haunter and the others? Cynthia pointed up. Haunter was snoring on the ceiling, a bubble forming and popping with each breath. Meanwhile, Tinkeradink was still diligently hammering away at the mini-nose statue. The statue had visibly shrunk, but it was still far from being absorbed into the hammer. Noticing Johan had woken up, Tinkadink's eyes lit up with anticipation. Grandma said we can head over now, Cynthia said. Johan sighed. All right, let's go. Chew. Tinkeradink shouldered its statue and followed eagerly. In the Research Institute's courtyard, Professor Carolina stood with the orbs in hand, smiling warmly. She explained that they allowed anyone, human or Pokémon, who showed interest in the orbs to interact with them briefly. This method, they hoped, might reveal clues about the orb's secrets. Johan vividly remembered how, in the Sino anime, Ash and Dawn were granted special access to the lustrous orb due to their connection to the Lake Guardians. Only here, though, Carolina reminded firmly. They can't leave this space. Chew. Tinkeradink practically snatched the adamant orb, while Haunter and Vulpix got to handle the lustrous orb. Caw-caw. Hoo-woo. Haunter and Vulpix examined the lustrous orb curiously but didn't seem particularly affected by it. Johan, however, kept a close eye on Tinkeradink, worried it might suddenly smash the adamant orb. Surprisingly, Tinkeradink remained calm. It held the adamant orb carefully, examining it from every angle. Then, after a moment of contemplation, squinted, stuck out its tongue, and licked the orb. Chew! A brilliant white light erupted from Tinkadink's body. Johan watched as Tinkeradink was enveloped in a radiant white light. For some reason, he thought, of course, it's my Pokémon, evolving like this should be no surprise. After all, wasn't Haunter's evolution triggered by wanting to wear a knight's armor during the school festival? He smirked. Yeah, this is normal. Beside him, Professor Carolina and Cynthia were more confused than anything. What's happening? They alternated glances between Tinkeradink and the adamant orb. Could it be the orb stimulated Tinkadink's evolution? This might be a groundbreaking discovery. Caw-caw. Haunter's eyes swirled in waves. Pulled out a white handkerchief from somewhere, mock-wiping its tearful eyes with a sinister grin. It had the distinct vibe of a proud older sibling watching their sibling grow up. Who? Vulpix, on the other hand, appeared more concerned. Does evolution hurt? It wondered nervously. But truthfully, it cared about something much more important. What if evolution makes me ugly? Vulpix secretly felt that ever since Ghastly evolved into Haunter, it had gotten less attractive. Amid the brilliant white light, Tinkadink's body began to change. Grew larger, its tiny ponytail elongating into a proper braid. Purple crystal-like structure on its chest expanded symmetrically to both sides, and its height shot up from 40 centimeters to 70 centimeters. When the light faded, its new form was revealed. Tinkeratu now stood confidently, cradling the adamant orb like a treasure. With a gleeful curiosity, it leaned forward and gave the orb a tentative lick. Chew! Its eyes squinted into narrow crescents, and it shivered slightly, as if it had tasted a cold, refreshing ice cream on a hot summer day. Yet, after evolving, the adamant orb seemed to hold less of a magnetic pull over Tinkeratu. It reluctantly returned the orb to Professor Carolina, its gaze lingering. Chew. Flicked its light pink braid and turned to Johan, eyes wide with realization. It had finally noticed its evolution. It evolved into Tinkeratu, Cynthia said softly. Johan knelt to pat the taller Tinkeratu on the head, smiling warmly. Congratulations, you've grown taller. For a moment, Johan felt a pang of bittersweet pride, like a parent seeing their child grow up. Tinkeratu leaned into his hand, eyes closing in delight. Chew! It let out a triumphant cry. I'll grow even taller. I'll be as tall as you one day. Johan chuckled. He wanted to say, that's your height limit, buddy. But it didn't seem like the right moment to crush its dreams. Tinkeratu then noticed its now massive hammer, which had grown significantly along with it. Tinkadink's previous hammer was a metallic toothpick. This was a full-blown sledgehammer. Its impressive size and heft matched Tinkeratu's newfound presence. Chew! Such a big hammer! Tinkeratu's eyes sparkled as it reached for the hammer's elongated handle. With a tug, it discovered it couldn't lift it. But instead of feeling discouraged, Tinkeratu's face lit up with excitement. Tightened its grip and pulled harder, finally lifting the hammer. With a determined glint in its eye, it started swinging. Whoosh! Whoosh! The hammer cut through the air, creating gusts that sent leaves rustling. What incredible strength, Professor Carolina murmured in awe. Even without being a trainer, she could tell the hammer was extraordinarily heavy. Yet in Tinkeratu's hands it seemed weightless. She shuddered to imagine the destruction one swing could cause. Frost began to form on the hammer as Tinkeratu infused it with its ice hammer move. Johan's Pokédex updated, displaying Tinkeratu's new information. Tinkeratu. Type Fairy/Steel. Ability Pickpocket. Moves Ice Hammer, Fake Out, Astonish, Fairy Wind, Baby Doll Eyes, Metal Claw, Rock Smash, Sweet Kiss, Reflect, Light Screen, Substitute, Protect, Rock Tomb, Stone Edge. Mood Excited, Jubilant. What a fantastic hammer! Condition Excellent. It seems to have absorbed a special metallic powder. Maybe you should investigate. Friendship level 100. Mama, I've evolved. Special metallic powder? Johan glanced at the adamant orb in Carolina's hand. Could Tinkeradink have absorbed some kind of metallic residue from the orb? As for Tinkeratu's move pool, it had only gained 2 new moves. Rock Smash, a fighting-type move with a chance to lower the target's defense. Sweet Kiss, a normal-type move that inflicts confusion. Great, Johan thought. Now it's learning dirty moves too. But knowing Tinkeratu's personality, it probably wouldn't use such tactics often. Preferred straightforward power, hitting hard and fast. Now, Johan also had a better idea of how to refine its signature move, Hammer Sleep. Chew! Satisfied with its practice swings, Tinkeratu suddenly remembered its mini-nose statue. Its hammer was bigger now. Surely it could finish what it started. Dashed to the statue and began hammering furiously. Bang! 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 The sound of its strikes echoed loudly. Compared to its earlier attempts, the progress was astounding. Chew! Tinkeratu proudly showed Johan its hammer, now infused with the remnants of the mini-nose statue. Great job! Johan ruffled its head affectionately. Still, he thought with a sigh, now that it can absorb objects into its hammer more easily, steel types are doomed. Tinkeratu beamed at the praise, its eyes crinkling in joy. Haunter and Vulpix circled Tinkeratu, marveling at its transformation. Caca, was I this impressive when I evolved? Hoo, so not all evolutions make you ugly, Vulpix murmured, letting out a tiny sigh of relief. Caca. Sigma, LLL. Haunter froze in shock. Meeting Pokémon really is the greatest thing in life, Cynthia said with a soft smile as she watched. Carolina glanced at her granddaughter with a knowing expression. Night fell over Celestic town, stars twinkling in the clear, snow-dappled sky. Johan slumped into a deck chair, staring at the cosmos with a deep sigh. I'm such an idiot. Why had he agreed to take over cooking for Cynthia and her Pokémon? Cooking for Cynthia was fine. But why did he have to include her Garchomp and Lucario in the deal? Between Haunter and Garchomp alone, their appetites were nearly killing him. Sure, snowfield barbecues were charming, but doubling his workload was exhausting. At least Garchomp had forgiven him for leaning on Cynthia's shoulder earlier. Johan's smile. Cynthia, carrying a sleepy Vulpix on her shoulder, raised her phone. She was about to snap a selfie. Johan forced a grin and gave a peace sign for the camera. The photo captured the pair and their Pokémon against the backdrop of the sparkling night sky. Click. Yo, Cynthia. Long time no see. A loud, brash voice shattered the peace. Johan turned to see a familiar flame-like hairstyle. Flint. His Infernape stood by his side, exuding fiery determination. What was he doing here at this hour? Johan's confusion deepened, but Cynthia's expression darkened. Cynthia! Flint shouted. This is my 91st challenge. Garchomp, Cynthia said coldly. Gra! Sensing her mood, Garchomp flew to her side. Dragon Rush, Cynthia commanded icily. Wait, already? Flint yelped in panic as Garchomp charged. A blazing blue dragon erupted through the night sky. Boom! Flint and his Infernape were sent flying, their screams fading as they crash-landed into a tree. Cynthia scoffed and turned on her heel. Johan, let's go home. Sweating nervously, Johan scrambled to follow. Right behind you. Back at the tree, Flint groaned in defeat, dangling from a branch. Darn it. Lost again. He glanced down at a bespectacled man standing below. Lucian, it's your turn. Lucian adjusted his glasses, his movements stiff. I must be out of my mind to humor you at this hour. Muttering under his breath, he released his Bronzong. We're leaving. Later that night, Johan lay on his bed, fast asleep. Haunter floated down from the ceiling and nudged Vulpix and Tinkeratu awake. Caw-caw. The three Pokémon tiptoed out of the room. Across the hall, Garchomp, Eevee, and Spiritomb did the same. The 6 Pokémon exchanged sly grins. Operation Midnight Adventure, go! Friday morning. Johan yawned, stretched his arms, and instinctively reached for his nightstand. Only to grab thin air. Wait a second. Had he actually managed to wake up naturally again? But why did his face feel so tingly and slightly sore? Chew. In its sleep, Tinkeratu rolled over and kicked Johan's pillow. If Johan had still been asleep, that foot would have landed directly on his face. He rubbed his cheek with a peculiar expression. No wonder I had that nightmare, he thought, recalling the vivid dream of being bear-hugged by a shiny female Machop, struggling, getting punched in the face, and ultimately giving up. Since evolving, Tinkeratu's height had increased by 30 centimeters, but its weight had skyrocketed from a mere 8.9 kilograms to a whopping 59.1 kilograms. Even excluding the hammer, that was a terrifying gain. To make matters worse, Tinkeratu was well-fed, consistently exercised, and literally pumped iron. Its strength was no joke. Even an unconscious kick in its sleep? Johan rubbed his face again. The fact that I'm alive and this is just a little numbness. Maybe I'm not normal anymore. Could it be? One day he might evolve into a super rookie himself? Wait. Johan's brows furrowed. Why are Haunter and Vulpix still asleep? Normally, Tinkeratu was the only one who indulged in sleeping in from time to time. Something fell off. Unable to figure it out, he decided to push his unease aside and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. However, when he passed through the living room, his eyes landed on a pile of assorted items in the corner. It was a massive collection of objects covering a variety of categories. The bulk of it was berries, but there were also strange, unfamiliar objects, venomous-looking teeth, claws, stone and metal chunks caked in mud, and even some seemingly unmeltable ice crystals. Johan's forehead creased with dark lines. Were you guys out shopping last night? Morning. The door to the guest room creaked open. Cynthia stepped out in her loose Pikachu pajamas, pink Jigglypuff slippers, and messy blonde bedhead. She let out a long yawn, muttered her greeting, then froze mid-step. Her pale cheeks flushed a faint red. Bam! She retreated back into her room, slamming the door shut. Johan, it's not like I haven't seen you in pajamas before. When Cynthia re-emerged, she was dressed in a light short-sleeved shirt. Fortunately, the house's mag cargo, perpetually active in the fireplace, kept the temperature cozy even in snowy weather. Two sat at the dining table for breakfast. It wasn't long before Cynthia noticed the pile of items in the corner. She furrowed her brow. Just as Johan opened his mouth to ask about it, Cynthia spoke. There's not much. Ha! Johan blinked in shock. You knew about this? Cynthia took a small bite of bread, nodding lightly. And Garchomp and the others told me that since you, Haunter, Vulpix, and Tinkeratu rarely visit, they wanted to send you back with some local specialties. Specialties? Wait a minute. Did that mean Garchomp and its crew were in on this? Johan's mind conjured images of Haunter and Garchomp rampaging through an Ecornet, their path littered with wailing Pokémon and stolen treasures. No wonder Haunter and the others hadn't sneaked out in Hoenn. It wasn't a lack of desire, they just needed a guide. But now that this precedent had been set, what's done once can easily become habit. As he watched Cynthia calmly sip her tea, unfazed by the loot pile, Johan couldn't help but wonder. Am I the odd one out here? 9 a.m. The second day of the researchers' conference began. Unlike the first day, which focused on theoretical discussions, this time the big names brought out their actual discoveries. For instance, Professor Oak's student, Professor Elm, presented a detailed framework of Pokémon egg groups. When Haunter realized it belonged to the Amorphous group, while Bidoof was part of the Field group, its face turned ashen. Garchomp, too, sulked upon learning it was classified under Monster and Dragon groups. Professor Elm also elaborated on Ditto's unique characteristics. Ditto belonged to a category he called the Ditto group. Yet it could breed with any Pokémon outside the undiscovered and Ditto groups, even disregarding gender. The room buzzed with astonished murmurs, even from the seasoned researchers. See, Johan said, trying to console Haunter. No Bidoof? There's always Ditto. Haunter's tear-filled eyes quivered as it sniffled. Caw-caw. Do you even hear yourself? Johan fell silent. Hey, liking someone doesn't have to mean breeding, he offered. Haunter blinked. Caw-caw. You know what? That actually makes sense. Finally. A rational response. Later, notable researchers took turns presenting their work. When Professor Rowan began discussing Milotic's natural evolution, he invited Johan, Cynthia, and Milotic to join him on stage. For a moment, Johan basked in the collective admiration of the academic audience. Among them, Professor Sycamore seemed particularly moved. Having once been similarly invited on stage by Rowan, he empathized deeply with Johan's experience. The rest of the day passed smoothly, as researchers unveiled findings both familiar and novel to Johan. For instance, Professor Kukui's research on the intersection of Pokémon moves and wrestling techniques explored ways to optimize move learning efficiency. Although TMs had existed for years, some moves remained notoriously difficult to master. Professor Kukui aimed to simplify the learning process through his innovative methods. Haunter and Tinkeratu especially enjoyed his lecture, picking up several useful tips. As the conference stretched into the evening, Johan had to leave early. The Academy's dean had reminded him repeatedly about the upcoming mentor assessment. The airport, Cynthia, along with Garchomp and Dragonite, saw Johan off. See you next time, she said, waving. Next time, Johan replied with a small smile. Probably sooner than you think, he thought to himself. Initially, Johan had hoped to visit Professor Rowan's lab to use its transmitter, a machine capable of creating the magnetic field needed for Haunter's evolution. However, Rowan mentioned that Professor Elm, who specialized in communication research, was nearing a breakthrough. With patience, Haunter's evolution could be achieved more safely and reliably. For now, Johan was content to wait. Safety came first. Haunter, however, was reluctant to leave empty coronet. The mountain's abundance of wild Pokémon with treasures made it a paradise. That night, finally home, Johan collapsed onto his new couch and pulled out his phone. Grain in the field, I'm home. Tinkersmirk.jpg. Evie eats cabbage, welcome back. Jingerpeak.jpg. Whether in this world or another, returning home after a trip always brought an inexplicable exhaustion. Just as Johan was about to wash up, another message arrived. Who am I? Are you there? Mewtwo? When did it get so polite? Johan stared at the text, momentarily stunned. Unbeknownst to him, Mewtwo had learned from its previous failed attempts to contact him. This time, it started with a cautious greeting. Grain in the field, I'm here. Inside Team Rocket's Kanto base, Mewtwo exhaled in relief. Finally. Now, what was I going to ask again? Before it could recall, Johan's follow-up message snapped its focus back. Grain in the field. Mewtwo's eyes glowed faintly as it activated its psychic powers, briefly freezing the nearby Porygon. Not this again, Porygon thought. Who am I? Recently, I've been seeing a figure in my subconscious. I don't know who it is, but I feel like it's connected to me somehow. A figure? Mew? Johan mused silently. This time, Mewtwo's calm demeanor surprised Johan. Compared to their initial interactions, this felt composed. He smiled. It's grown so much. Who am I? Can you help me meet it? I want to see it. Meeting Mewtwo? Big guy, I think you're overestimating me. I'm just lucky enough to know you. Besides, this is the Pokémon special timeline, then Giovanni likely created Mewtwo with one goal in mind, to help locate his missing son, Silver. Mewtwo's abilities, especially its capability to track using DNA, should theoretically make it great for finding people. But right now, Mewtwo clearly lacks control over its power and remains prone to dangerous outbursts. Grain in the field. If you can sense its presence, then theoretically it should be able to sense you too. Who am I? But it hasn't come to me. Why? Grain in the field. Maybe it's not ready to see you yet. But more importantly, why do you want to see it? Mewtwo froze, uncertainty flashing across its face. Why? It didn't know. All it had was an instinctive feeling that this other being might hold the answers to its existence. Johan, however, already seemed to grasp what was on Mewtwo's mind. Grain in the field. You want to find the meaning and value of your existence, don't you? Who am I? Yes. Grain in the field. Then let me ask you something simple. Grain in the field, two Haunter. One has just been born. The other just helped its trainer win a Pokémon League championship. What is the purpose of each one's existence? Haunter. Mewtwo softly repeated the name, its psychic aura flickering. In the vast, data-rich void of the rocket base's network, the captured Porygon stiffened as Mewtwo's psychic influence washed over it. Porygon internally screamed, "Oh no, not this again!" Who am I? Their purpose depends on perspective. Johan raised an eyebrow at Mewtwo's response. Oh? It seemed Mewtwo had grown sharper, able to dissect a question's intent rather than simply answer at face value. Grain in the field, exactly. But why does the perspective or reference point matter? Mewtwo's silence stretched long this time. Johan casually put his phone down, went to take a shower, and even supervised Haunter and Vulpix's evening grooming session. By the time he returned, Mewtwo's reply finally appeared. Who am I? Responsibility. Based on the perspective, each Haunter bears a different responsibility. Johan nodded. Mewtwo wasn't wrong, but this wasn't the end of the conversation. If anything, this was where things got more complex. Grain in the field. And where does responsibility come from? Fearing Mewtwo might take too long or overheat its brain trying to figure this out, Johan added his own thoughts before it could respond. Grain in the field, a book I read once said, responsibility begins in dreams. Another author argued, responsibility comes from imagination. Who am I, dreams? Imagination? Grain in the field, let me give you an example. You've seen this other being in your subconscious. You believe it's connected to you, so you feel compelled to find it. That urge becomes a responsibility you place on yourself, a responsibility born from your own thoughts. Grain in the field, so your desire to seek the meaning of your existence is, in itself, part of your existence's meaning. Wait, what? Meaning is just meaning? Somewhere deep within the rocket network, Porygon metaphorically collapsed. Nope. I'm out. Don't get paid enough for this. Grain in the field. All you need to do now is let your imagination run wild, but within limits. Rules and self-discipline are essential. As Johan hit send, he noticed Mewtwo's chat avatar dim. Did it short-circuit again? Johan frowned. Was the idea of self-discipline that hard to process? Till he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Mewtwo's progress was undeniable. It just needed more time to digest the conversation. Rocket Base, Viridian City. The hum of electricity filled the dimly lit laboratory. Damn it, the Porygon's frozen again. What happened this time? Dreams? Imagination? Well, at least it's not ghastly. Wait, Mewtwo's psychic readings are skyrocketing again. It's surpassing our projected thresholds. The laboratory bustled with controlled chaos, researchers scurrying between stations. Giovanni, observing through the upper observation window, stood silent with his hands behind his back. Beside him, Matori chewed thoughtfully on a biscuit before scribbling notes into her tablet. Boss, as expected, every time Mewtwo interacts with Johan, its psychic power spikes, and the Porygon crashes, she reported. Giovanni smirked, his gaze fixed on the armored Mewtwo. Do you know the biggest difference between Mewtwo and other Pokémon? Matori blinked. Its overwhelming strength and power. Giovanni shook his head slightly. No. Thinks more. It has a mind that seeks to understand the very essence of things. While Mewtwo's interactions with Johan caused disturbances, Giovanni couldn't deny their benefits. Each session left Mewtwo stronger and more self-aware. This was exactly what Giovanni wanted. Back on the ground floor, a weary researcher muttered, "At this rate, it'll destroy the lab." Overhearing this, Matori glanced at Giovanni nervously. "What about the laboratory itself?" she asked. Giovanni turned to leave. "Fix it." Johto region, Lake of Rage. Meanwhile, Lance's day had just begun as he patrolled the Johto skies on his Dragonite. A burst of static crackled in his earpiece. ZZZZT. Ruckus. ZZZT spotted near Lake of Rage. ZZZZT. Massive red Gyarados. ZZZT need backup. Lance's eyes narrowed. Dragonite, turn around. We're heading to the Lake of Rage. The storm-covered sky roared with lightning and rain as Dragonite descended toward the chaos below. Amid the waves, a colossal red-scaled Gyarados rampaged, its enraged cries echoing across the water. Lance is here. The gathered League officers visibly relaxed at the sight of their iconic champion. Lance, however, focused solely on the thrashing Gyarados. His usual calm demeanor shifted into a fierce grin. Dragonite Hurricane. Kanaz Pokémon Academy. Saturday morning brought the highly anticipated top 4 matches for the Instructor assessment. Johan, the dark horse of the competition, had drawn an unprecedented amount of attention, not only as a psychologist but also for his unconventional tactics. The arena was filled with excited chatter, with fans holding signs of support for Johan. Amid the buzz, Johan couldn't help but notice Tinkeratu staring at Steven's Skarmory in the distance. Chew? Its grip on its hammer tightened as it sized up the metallic bird. Skarmory swallowed hard. Relax, Johan sighed, patting Tinkeratu's head. The hammer-wielding Pokémon turned back to him, beaming brightly. Chew. Amidst the surging waves of cheers and under the gaze of numerous cameras, Johan and his opponent for this round stepped onto the battlefield. According to Roxanne, Johan's opponent this time was a trainer named Tapea. He was adept at using electric-type Pokémon and was particularly skilled at battle strategies centered around Thunder Wave. His strength wasn't to be underestimated, having previously earned 8 badges and participated in Hoenn's Evergrande Conference, where he made it to the top 32. Now, he served as a first-year combat class instructor. The chosen battle mode for today was 6 versus 3 rotation battles. Frankly, Johan had some doubts about whether this was rigged. Facing him was a man with long, golden hair, dressed in a green coat. Top 32. Even a rookie like the infamous Red got into the top 16 on his first try at the Indigo League, Johan mused. He didn't mean to belittle the accomplishment of being in the top 32. Managing to collect 8 badges and qualify for a league tournament was already impressive. Many students at Kanazumi Pokemon Academy, outside of outliers like Steven or other exceptional talents such as Roxanne or Flannery, would struggle to earn even half the badges needed to participate in a league tournament. Through all, the regional tournaments only allowed a few hundred participants each year. But, since Johan often found himself around people like Steven and Cynthia, his standards had shifted. Without much small talk or preamble, the referees signaled for the battle to begin. While the format was 6 versus 3, Johan didn't have the luxury of selecting his Pokémon. His team only had 3 members. Tapea, on the other hand, carefully deliberated before choosing a Pokeball. Judging by his serious expression, he seemed to take this battle very seriously, showing proper respect for Johan as an opponent. Johan, however, remained relaxed. He had already exceeded his initial goals, so the outcome of this match wasn't a big concern for him. Facing Tapea's focused demeanor, Johan couldn't help but think, "It's fine, seasoned teachers don't usually engage in pre-battle smack talk. That'd be childish. Johan-sensei, I'll admit your tactics are strong, but your limited Pokemon pool is your Achilles heel. Too easy to counter. I'm afraid your assessment ends here," Tapea shouted, full of confidence. Johan. He had just convinced himself that Tapea wouldn't stoop to trash-talking, only to be immediately proven wrong. Still, the comment successfully hyped up the crowd, who loved a good rivalry with plenty of sparks. Turns out, Tapea's reputation as a skilled strategist didn't exempt him from the Academy's elective course on trash-talking during battles, a class designed to prepare students for less formal but emotionally charged encounters in the field. As Johan smirked slightly, his response left Tapea momentarily stunned. "Tapea-sensei, have you eaten yet?" Johan asked calmly. "Ha!" Tapea blinked in confusion. "My grandma's voice is louder than yours," Johan replied, shaking his head. Tapea's face darkened. Crowd erupted into cheers. Ah, Johan thought. There's definitely a reason red isn't allowed in these competitions. Battle start. The referee's flag came down and both trainers released their Pokémon simultaneously. Magneton Electric Terrain. Tapea shouted immediately. Crackle. Golden arcs of electricity surged from the freshly summoned Magneton, weaving together into a shimmering electrical field that blanketed the entire arena. Electric Terrain prevents all Pokémon on the field from falling asleep and boosts the power of electric-type moves. It was clear from this opening move that Tapea had done his homework on Johan and his team. Knowing that both Haunter and Vulpix had strong sleep-inducing moves like Hypnosis, he preemptively neutralized their effectiveness. Unfortunately for him, Johan's first Pokémon wasn't Vulpix or Haunter. It was Tinkeratu. And the moment the shimmering terrain began to form, the gleeful Tinkeratu had already reflexively swung its hammer. Bam! The hammer landed squarely on Magneton mid-move, slamming it straight into the ground with a resounding thud. Chew! As Tinkeratu finally registered what it was looking at, its eyes sparkled with delight. Metal! darted forward, hammer in tow. While the magneton lay embedded in the dirt, Tapea yelled, "Magneton Thunder Wave!" Sizzle. The downed magneton quickly discharged a glowing yellow electric wave, crackling towards Tinkatuff. "Tinkatuff, rock smash!" Johan called out. "Chew!" Tinkatuff's eyes gleamed with determination as it adjusted its grip on the hammer, swinging it back in a wide arc before striking Magneton with bone-crushing force. Boom! Magneton, hit dead-on, was sent hurtling backward. A thin crack appeared on its metal casing as it landed. Did that just crack its shell? Magneton was a Steel-type Pokémon. Even with Rock Smash's armor-breaking properties, it was practically unheard of for such a powerful move to leave physical damage like this. The audience gasped. On the sidelines, Steven Skarmory, watching from the stands, instinctively tucked its wings closer to its body and swallowed hard. That hammer looks dangerous. Still, Magneton's Thunder Wave had done its job. Golden sparks danced across Tinkatuff's body, leaving it paralyzed. Tapea breathed a sigh of relief. At least it was paralyzed now. But when Tinkatuff casually plucked one of Magneton's magnets off the ground and affixed it to its hammer with glee, Tapea's expression darkened again. "Magneton Thunderbolt!" Tinkatuff, drop the hammer, dodge it! Johan ordered. Dodge? How? Tinkatuff smirked mischievously as it planted the hammer upright into the ground, the metal absorbing the brunt of the thunderbolt. Crackle! The attack dissipated harmlessly as though striking a lightning rod. Chew! Tinkatuff glanced at its hammer, seemingly impressed. Then, gripping the handle with both hands, it leaped into the air and brought the hammer crashing down on Magneton with terrifying precision. Smash! Electric sparks scattered in all directions, and Magneton slumped to the ground. "Magneton is unable to battle," the referee announced. Crowd roared in approval. "Forget clever tricks. Johan-sensei just brute-forced his way through." Wait, wasn't that still technically a tactic? Yeah, luring the thunderbolt to the hammer first? Brilliant! Tapea recalled Magneton, his brows furrowed. As he prepared his second Pokémon, Johan raised a hand. "Tinkatuff, return," he said calmly. "Return!" Tapea exclaimed. Towering cheers filled the air as Johan and his opponent Tapea walked onto the battlefield under the watchful eyes of cameras. According to Roxanne, Tapea was a trainer who excelled in using electric-type Pokémon and was a specialist in electrowave tactics. Tapea was no amateur. He had once earned 8 badges, competed in the Hoenn League's Evergrande Conference, and even made it into the top 32. He currently served as a battle instructor for Year 1 Class 4. Today's battle format? A 6 Pokémon rotation battle with 3 active slots. Johan nearly rolled his eyes. Was it rigged? Facing the golden-haired man in a green coat, Johan muttered to himself. Top 32, huh? Even that blockhead in his first Indigo League got top 16. He didn't mean to look down on Tapea's achievement. Reaching the league's main stage already spoke volumes about one's strength as a trainer. Still, Johan's constant association with elites like Steven and Cynthia had significantly raised his standards. Tapea looked dead serious as he threw his first Pokeball. His respect for Johan's tactics was evident. He wasn't going to hold back. Johan, on the other hand, wore a relaxed smile. His expectations for this tournament had already been surpassed. Win or lose, it didn't matter. Facing Tapea, Johan thought, at least teachers usually avoid trash talk, keeps things classy. Johan, I'll admit your tactics are strong, Tapea suddenly shouted. But with only 3 Pokémon, you're far too easy to counter. This will be your last match. Johan blinked. So much for teachers being classy. The audience erupted into excited cheers, loving the tension and drama. Johan sighed. Really? Trash talk against a psychology teacher? With a faint smile, Johan countered. Tapea, did you have breakfast? Tapea furrowed his brow. Ha! My grandmother's voice is louder than yours. Tapea's expression darkened. Crowd roared with laughter. This is exactly why trash-talking the psychology teacher is a bad idea. The referee raised the flags and declared the battle underway. Red light flashed as Tapea released his first Pokémon. Out came a sleek, wolf-like Pokémon covered in blue and yellow fur, Manectric, the discharge Pokémon. Johan had swapped out Tinkeratu, sending out caw-caw. With a mischievous cackle, Haunter emerged, its ghostly laughter resonating like that of a cunning villain. Haunter's fanbase in the audience erupted into cheers, with some waving their handmade signs. Manectric, start running, use Thunderbolt. Tapea commanded. Electric arcs crackled from Manectric's golden mane, surging forward in a blazing stream of lightning. Boom! The Thunderbolt hit dead on, shattering Haunter into countless fragments. Wait, what? Was that a substitute? The commentators shouted in excitement. But where had Haunter gone? Manectric, watch your back, Tapea quickly warned. Having done his research, he knew Johan's Haunter loved sneaky attacks. Sure enough, a grinning Haunter emerged from Manectric's shadow, its claws raised to strike. Caw-caw! Manectric unleashed another surge of electricity, shredding the Haunter to pieces. Or did it? Johan smirked. Haunter, toxic. From the front, Haunter reappeared, a glob of toxic sludge forming at its claws before splattering onto Manectric. Purple goo seeped into its golden fur, hissing as it corroded. Manectric has been poisoned. Manectric, rain dance. Tapea's command caught the audience off guard. Manectric howled, summoning dark clouds that quickly blanketed the battlefield. Rain poured down in torrents. Johan chuckled. So predictable. Manectric's rain dance could only mean two things, setting up for thunder or preparing for Volt Switch. Haunter, confuse Ray, Johan said calmly. As the eerie, glowing orbs of light struck, Manectric stumbled, sparks crackling chaotically. With Manectric now both poisoned and confused, Tapea's strategy fell apart. Haunter capitalized immediately. Caw-caw! Using Hex to double its damage against the poisoned opponent, Haunter's attack overwhelmed Manectric, leaving it too weakened to fight. Manectric is unable to battle. The referee's declaration sent a wave of cheers through the stadium. Johan's strategic predictions are flawless. Tapea's second Pokémon, Heliolisk, emerged. The sleek electric normal type's dry skin ability made it thrive in rain, healing it over time while preparing for a devastating thunder. It was an ideal counter to Haunter. But Johan simply smirked. Haunter, return. He swapped Haunter out with Gwoot. Vulpix appeared, its snowy white fur shimmering under the rain. Heliolisk, thunder. The charged blast shot toward Vulpix, only for the rain to abruptly stop as snow warning changed the battlefield to a snowy wonderland. Thunder missed entirely. Blizzard, Johan said with a grin. Snow swirled fiercely, pelting Heliolisk with icy winds. In the hailstorm, Heliolisk stood no chance. Heliolisk is unable to battle. With two Pokémon down, Tapea's frustration was evident. His strategic rhythm had been completely disrupted. Johan remained relaxed as he switched to his final Pokémon. Out came Tinkeratu, hefting its massive hammer with a mischievous twinkle in its eye. Chew! Tapea sent out his last Pokémon, Magneton, in desperation. The battle was over in mere moments. Tinkeratu's Gigaton hammer crushed Magneton's defenses, sealing Johan's flawless victory. Johan is the winner. Crowd erupted in cheers. As Johan and Tapea shook hands, Tapea opened his mouth, hesitating. What is it? Johan asked, raising an eyebrow. My Magneton's magnet. Could you, give it back? Johan looked genuinely confused. What magnet? Congratulations, Professor. Devon, Roxanne, and Flannery appeared in the corridor leading away from the arena. Just a bit of luck, Johan replied with a bright, humble smile. For him, every win past the quarterfinals was a bonus, and he felt no pressure at all. But seriously, Professor, how exactly did you train your Tinkatuff? Flannery mumbled, her curiosity piqued. How? Johan pondered for a moment. The formula was simple. Feed it energy cubes, spar occasionally with strong Pokémon, and maintain a consistent training regimen. Of course, the energy cubes might have been made from a certain future champion's guidebook on cube crafting, refined with the assistance of a top-tier coordinator. The sparring partners? Well, nothing special, just some Pokémon owned by trainers ranked among the world's top 10. And then there was Tinkatuff's natural talent. Eat well, read often, avoid snacking, and get plenty of rest, Johan finally replied. Flannery. Devon and his Skarmory exchanged glances. The metallic bird gave a deliberate nod, its feathers clinking softly. Scree. Got it. When I grow younger, I'll train just like that. Grow younger. Johan's expression turned peculiar. What an oddly specific concept. Devon chuckled. Professor, why not let Tinkatuff help repair Skarmory? It seems eager to try. Johan raised an eyebrow. You're sure about this? Absolutely. All right, if you insist. Training ground shenanigans. In a spacious outdoor training field, Tinkatuff was practically bouncing with glee. Chew? Standing beside it was Haunter, cackling mischievously. Both were wearing makeshift metal wings fashioned from thin silver plates, plucked directly from Steven's Skarmory. Skarmory's mournful cries echoed in Johan's mind as he recalled how Tinkatuff gleefully plucked off the plates, like harvesting ripe fruit. It was a good thing Steven firmly believed in Tinkatuff's repair skills, or Johan wouldn't have let the hammer-wielding menace run wild. Nearby, Vulpix sat with its fluffy tail curled around itself, watching the scene unfold with evident concern. Ooh, falling from that height would hurt, wouldn't it? Meanwhile, Johan, seated under the shade of a tree, closed his notebook. Seeing the sun beginning to set, he felt a sudden burst of playfulness. Vulpix, he called. Hoo. The little fox turned its head, curious. But before it could react, Johan darted over with quick, playful steps. ll/. With a startled yip, Vulpix tried to back away but was swiftly scooped into Johan's arms. Flipping the Pokémon over, he went straight for its soft belly, giving it an exaggerated rub. ****. Eyes half-lidded in bliss, Vulpix resigned itself to the ultimate betrayal. The peaceful moment was short-lived, as a looming shadow fell over them. Johan looked up to see Haunter grinning wickedly above, its oversized tongue lolling out as it hovered like a mischievous specter. Caca. Sigh. Johan's face paled. Haunter, let's talk about this. But the shadow swooped down mercilessly. Nearby, Tinkatuff crouched, watching the scene unfold with gleaming eyes. Then it smirked. Lowering its hammer to the ground, it positioned itself like a sprinter at the starting line, ready to launch. Having just escaped Haunter's shadow smash, Johan turned to see Tinkatuff's stance and felt his heart skip a beat. Tinkatuff, wait. Don't do anything rash. Chew. Here I come. With a mighty push, Tinkatuff launched itself forward. Haunter, call Nurse Joy. Post-rampage recovery. By the time Tinkatuff tackled Johan, the sun was dipping below the horizon, and a gentle drizzle had begun. Clutching his chest, Johan groaned. Felt as though he'd been hit by a runaway truck. Above him, Vulpix balanced a leaf on its head, pretending it was a makeshift umbrella. When they finally made it back home, the rain magically stopped. Johan headed to the kitchen, cutting up a plate of apples. Have some fruit while we think about dinner, he announced. Ghosting down from the ceiling, Haunter immediately made its preference known. Caca. Barbecue. Outdoors. The open-air grilling session back in Sino had left a lasting impression, though that memory was marred by Garchomp stealing most of its meat. This time, Haunter had plans to take photos and send them to Cynthia, just to annoy Garchomp. Fine, barbecue could work, Johan mused. Haunter grinned smugly. But you could have just asked, Haunter. It's not like I'd say no. He glanced sideways, catching Haunter hovering near his shoulder. The Haunter on the ceiling dissolved into a fading illusion. Playing with double team again? Johan asked, raising an eyebrow. Grinning, Haunter reached out with its tongue and snatched half the apple slices from the plate. Caca! Meanwhile, Vulpix was curled into a fluffy ball midair, surrounded by a faint glow of psychic energy. Johan's eye twitched. Every time Vulpix meditated like this, he felt an inexplicable urge to grab it and squish it like a marshmallow. Surely no other Pokémon meditated as adorably as Vulpix. Tinkeratu, any dinner ideas? Johan asked, turning to the hammer-wielding Pokémon. Tinkeratu was doing one-handed push-ups, occasionally popping an energy cube into its mouth between reps. Chew? It didn't even pause. Now it was showing off, balancing on one finger while its feet held up its giant hammer. Johan pinched the bridge of his nose. They're so self-motivated, I barely feel like a trainer. Till it was less about strict training and more about letting them enjoy what they loved, whether it was Vulpix building snowmen, Tinkeratu smashing things, or Haunter licking people. If nothing else, it validated his interest-based training method. All right, since no one's suggesting anything, dinner will be sticky rice balls. Caca! Haunter's cry of indignation echoed through the house. What happened to democracy? Dinner hijinks. That night, they set up a small fire on the rooftop. Tinkeratu took it upon itself to use scraps from their old smashed sofa as fuel, while Haunter gleefully took selfies with its food, oily fingers and all. It even sent one to Cynthia, who responded with a video of Garchomp roaring in anger. Caca! Satisfied with its success, Haunter floated in victory circles. However, when Johan's phone buzzed with a message, Haunter tensed, quickly stashing its phone. Johan glanced at it, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Haunter broke into a nervous sweat. Was he catching on? Before Johan could press the matter, his phone chimed again. Dragon Envoy, Johan, I need your help with something. Lance? Curious, Johan opened the attachment. It was a video file titled redgyarados.avi. In the video, a terrifying crimson Gyarados lay defeated in a massive ice structure, surrounded by frozen waves. It was clear the Gyarados had been subdued, but its immense power was still evident. Dragon Envoy, its emotions are unstable. I've captured it, but whenever it leaves its Pokeball, it goes on a rampage. I can't even communicate with it properly. Johan furrowed his brow. Another mess involving Team Rocket? Grain in the field. Where did you catch it? Dragon Envoy, Johto region, Lake of Rage. Lake of Rage. So, it's the red Gyarados from Johan's memories. Wait a minute. Didn't Silver also catch a red Gyarados at the Lake of Rage? Could it be the same one? For a moment, Johan found himself caught up in the tangled mess of this world's timeline. Well, not like it's the first time. Honestly, even if Red and Ash stood together right in front of him, Johan might not even be surprised anymore. Grain in the field. So, you want me to try calming it down? Dragon Envoy, that's right. Grain in the field. Dragon Envoy. Confused Slowpokeface.jpg. Grain in the field. Jengarfacepalm.jpg. Isn't it more your style to just fly over here directly? Taking your time like this doesn't sound like the decisive Lance at all. Dragon Envoy, I forgot to mention, the red Gyarados can't stay inside its Pokeball. Grain in the field, can't stay inside? Johan imagined situations where powerful Pokémon couldn't be confined by regular Pokeballs. But with Lance's resources, wouldn't using a luxury ball solve the problem? Dragon Envoy, while it can't break out of the ball, it injures itself in its frenzy. Johan understood now. It wasn't about escaping, it was self-harm. Grain in the field. So, you're asking me to visit Johto? Dragon Envoy, yes. Johto. Dragon Envoy, I know you're busy, so there's no rush. I'll be in Johto for a while, investigating the Lake of Rage incident. Grain in the field. What about the Gyarados? Dragon Envoy. I'll be keeping it in the Dragon's Den while I investigate. The Dragon's Den of the Dragon Tamer clan, huh? That Gyarados is probably about to endure some growing pains. Alright then. If Lance insists, it looks like a trip to Johto is in Johan's future. Johan had another thought as he leaned back in his chair and gazed at the vast moonlit sky. Maybe it's time for me to go out and explore too. The world of Pokémon is so vast. Johan knew he couldn't spend his entire life cooped up at the Kanaz City Pokémon Academy or even remain solely in Hoenn. Someday, he would need to leave his mark on the world, meeting fascinating people and Pokémon alike. The next morning, Johan returned to the academy. Although it was supposed to be the final day of the Instructor assessments, with intense battles between top contenders, the campus was unusually quiet. That's because yesterday, the format for the final round had already been decided. A 6v6 full battle mode. That was awkward. Johan only had 3 Pokémon. The entire academy, and much of the internet, already knew this wasn't a secret. Drawing a 6v6 format in such a situation? If the mode had been 6v4 double battles, Johan could have let one Pokémon sit out and still had a fair chance. But with a full battle format and only half the team size, the odds were undeniably stacked against him. To address this potential unfairness, the Dean of Academic Affairs, Fitzwilliam, had publicly announced yesterday that the format would be determined by random draw. The result had left many spectators disappointed. But regardless of the outcome, the Academy had upheld its reputation for fairness. As for Johan himself, he didn't mind one way or the other. Fitzwilliam had already called him after yesterday's draw to inform him of the results. Fitzwilliam assured Johan that even though he couldn't compete in the final round, the school leadership highly valued his abilities. They had decided to award him the same rewards as the first-place winner. The only difference? Johan wouldn't hold the title of first place. Of course, Johan pretended to decline. Fitzwilliam insisted. Johan declined again. Fitzwilliam emphasized once more, and finally Johan reluctantly agreed to accept. Today, Johan came to campus to claim his assessment rewards. Rewards: Top 8 TM Venoshock. Top 4 a small ice stone. Top 2 a muscle band. The TM selection didn't include powerhouse moves like Swords Dance, Skill Swap, or Aurora Veil, but Venoshock was a strong addition. Venoshock, type, poison base power, 65 effect. If the target is poison, the move's power doubles to 130. This TM would significantly enhance Haunter's poison-type arsenal. While Haunter excelled in ghost moves, its only poison-type options were Toxic and Smog, which weren't ideal for offensive play. The Ice Stone, as Johan expected, was an unfinished small stone. Small Ice Stone, a magical stone capable of evolving certain Pokémon, though its incomplete form limits its use. Can be ground into powder for consumption. Despite its diminutive size, the Ice Stone still radiated a mysterious brilliance. This reward would benefit Vulpix, even if it couldn't yet trigger evolution. At the very least, the infused energy would help Vulpix master its Ice-type moves. The Muscle Band was clearly for Tinkeratu. Muscle Band, a headband that slightly increases the power of physical attacks. It was a perfect match for Tinkeratu, which had yet to receive any tailored gear. Johan was confident the little hammer enthusiast would love it. What about the first-place prize? Johan asked. I don't know either, Fitzwilliam admitted with a wry smile. That so-called mystery reward was personally chosen by the principal. But the principal has been in Paldea and hasn't returned yet. Come to think of it, despite working at the Kanaz Academy for some time, Johan had never actually seen the principal. Don't worry, Johan, Fitzwilliam reassured him. The principal is well aware of your performance and has been singing your praises. He said he's preparing a surprise for you. A surprise? As long as it's not a shock, Johan thought. Back home, each of Johan's Pokémon eagerly received their respective rewards. Haunter immediately began studying Venoshock. Tinkeratu proudly wore its new muscle band and started doing one-finger push-ups while balancing its hammer on its legs. Vulpix carefully examined the ice stone before nibbling on it like candy. Its eyes sparkled with joy. Ooh, it tastes like snowflakes. Johan couldn't help but laugh. Several days passed. Thursday. After packing his luggage, Johan prepared to depart with his little companions in tow. He had already informed the academic office of his plans. Learning that he was assisting a league investigator, the academic dean, Fitzwilliam, didn't hesitate to grant him leave. In reality, Johan was simply being polite, as he didn't have any classes scheduled for the next few days. The destination? The Johto region's Blackthorn City. Originally, Lance had offered to personally escort him. With his trusty Dragonite, Charizard, and Aerodactyl, Lance boasted he could make a quick round trip between Hoenn and Johto, which weren't too far apart geographically. Riding the Dragon King back to Johto, steward of the Dragon Clan? Johan brushed the fleeting thought aside and politely declined. No need to trouble such a busy celebrity investigator. I'll just take a plane. The weather was perfect, clear skies with a flock of lazy starly flying overhead. Dragging his suitcase along, Johan arrived at Kanaz Airport. Ooh, Vulpix lay comfortably on top of his suitcase, squinting contentedly at the sun. Tinkeratu, hammer slung over its shoulder, pouted with visible dissatisfaction. Wouldn't it be better to just hang the suitcase off its hammer? Once aboard the plane, Johan firmly warned Tinkeratu to abandon any ideas of tinkering with the aircraft. With that settled, he closed his eyes for a brief nap. The flight from Hoenn to Johto wasn't particularly long. In true Pokémon World fashion, the in-flight meals were generous, offering options for both humans and Pokémon. Haunter eagerly licked up its meal, leaving nothing behind before turning its gaze along with Tinkeratu toward Vulpix's untouched food. Ooh! Vulpix sighed, lightly exhaling a frosty breath to chill their drinks. The trio toasted with their icy beverages, downing them in a single gulp. As the plane approached the Johto region, turbulence struck. The violent shaking jolted Johan awake. Looking out the window, he caught a glimpse of an orange figure zipping by at high speed. Carrying a camera? For a moment, Johan's pulse raced. Then a few more shapes appeared and the realization hit him. They were Fiero, the budget Ho-Oh. Fortunately, League airplanes were well prepared for such incidents, with protocols in place to handle various scenarios. Once the Fiero realized the plane was impenetrable, they quickly flew off. Still, the experience reminded Johan of something. In the Pokémon world, there were two types of Pokémon you should always prepare for travel. Flying Pokémon for air travel. Water Pokémon for sea travel. Shaking off the nerves, Johan pulled out his notebook to draft a new script. His previous project had been well received but was on hold due to high production costs and logistical challenges. This time, he aimed for something smaller in scale. Blackthorn City Airport, Johto region. Johan stepped out of the airport, suitcase in hand. Johan! A familiar figure approached, Lance beaming with enthusiasm. Without warning, Lance pulled Johan into a big bear hug. Nearby, Dragonite bounced eagerly, seemingly wanting to join in. All right, I surrender, Johan said, wriggling free. He quickly handed Dragonite a few poke blocks to redirect its attention. Finally free, Johan sighed in relief. Let's go. Claire's already prepared. Prepared? Johan blinked in confusion. Blackthorn City wasn't particularly large or bustling, nestled as it was among the mountains. However, it was steeped in dragon culture, with dragon-themed motifs everywhere. Even on the streets, people casually walked around with dragon Pokémon in tow. As they walked, Lance recounted his findings from the Lake of Rage investigation. I discovered traces of Team Rocket near the lake, Lance said, his expression darkening. Team Rocket, a persistent thorn in the side of both the Kanto and Johto leagues. Despite their best efforts, neither league had managed to eliminate the organization entirely. Figures, Johan muttered. But Lance hesitated. Recently, Team Rocket has been unusually quiet. I'm not sure what they're plotting this time. Guess we'd have to ask Giovanni, Johan thought wryly. What about the Lake of Rage? Did you find anything unusual? Johan asked. When I got there, Team Rocket had already evacuated. But I found strange magnetic devices around the lake, Lance explained. Magnetic devices? I've called in an expert to analyze them, but I suspect they're related to Gyarados' behavior. And Gyarados? How's it doing? Still the same. Their conversation carried them to the entrance of the Blackthorn Gym. Johan froze. Rocket Base, Viridian City, Kanto. Boss, Johan has just arrived in Blackthorn City, Midori reported to Giovanni. Hearing this, Giovanni popped a cookie into his mouth and nodded thoughtfully. Lake of Rage, I assume? Likely. The Lake of Rage incident was indirectly connected to Johan. Mewtwo had once again disrupted Team Rocket's internal network. As its powers grew stronger, the resulting outages were increasingly severe, this time even affecting Team Rocket's operations in Johto. However, Giovanni remained unfazed. The Lake of Rage project, part of Team Rocket's broader initiatives, was meant to study how magnetic fields and sound waves influenced Pokémon. Originally conceived as a contingency plan to control Mewtwo, the project had become redundant now that Mewtwo was manageable. Wrap it up quickly and have Ariana keep things quiet, Giovanni instructed. Yes, sir. By the way, Midori, Giovanni continued, since Johan's in Johto, pay him a visit. Midori blinked. Meet him? Do you need me to retrieve him? A faint glimmer of excitement danced in her eyes. No, Giovanni said with a smile. Just drop a subtle hint about your identity and gauge his reaction. Back at Blackthorn Gym. You've got to be kidding me, Johan muttered, his eye twitching. Lance laughed awkwardly. Sorry, but it's the rule. To access the Dragon's Den, you need the gym leader's approval, earned through a battle. Johan glared. Couldn't you just bring Gyarados outside? Well, Lance scratched his head. Its destructive tendencies make that a bit tricky. Besides, don't you want to see the Dragon's Den for yourself? Truth be told, Johan was curious. As a lifelong Pokémon enthusiast, the Dragon's Den had always intrigued him. Fine, Johan sighed. A little. Relax, Lance reassured him. I've already told Claire that win or lose, you're allowed entry. Easy for you to say, Johan grumbled, eyeing his companions. Haunter floated lazily nearby, Vulpix napped in its signature snowball pose, and Tinkeratu was sneakily hanging Johan's suitcase off its hammer. Well, if this was just a formality... The gym doors creaked open, revealing Claire waiting inside, a confident smirk on her face. Finally, she said, cracking her whip. Johan turned to see Lance sneaking off to the side. Why does this feel like I've been lured into a trap? Haunter floated out of Johan's shadow, donning its sunglasses with a cocky flourish. Kaka. Let's do this. Gym challenge. Hearing Haunter's taunting cry, Claire let out a cold laugh. Been waiting for this. She hadn't forgotten her previous loss to Johan. This time, she wouldn't be relying on her second-string Pokémon. The Blackthorn gym staff were also ready, including a referee and an elderly man in a long white robe with a full head of white hair. From how Lance was chatting with him, this must be one of the legendary dragon elders. However, instead of exuding an air of stern authority, the elder seemed warm and approachable, his face full of gentle smiles. That was until he fell asleep mid-conversation with Lance. Lance noticed and sheepishly flashed an okay hand gesture toward Johan and Claire. Johan's expression grew odd. It was clear this match was rigged. This gym challenge will be a one-on-one battle. The first Pokémon to lose will determine the outcome. The referee, dressed in Blackthorn gym attire, raised 2 flags in hand. Now, trainers, send out your Pokémon. Claire threw off her cape and removed a Pokeball from her belt, tossing it forward with practiced precision. Johan, on the other hand, simply raised his hand and pointed. "Go, Haunter!" "Caw-caw!" Haunter let out a wicked laugh, sticking out its long red tongue to snatch its sunglasses and pop them into its mouth before floating onto the battlefield. Claire's Pokeball opened in a flash of light, revealing a spiked, winged dragon Pokémon. "Drudigan!" "Roar!" The dragon's navy blue scales glinted, its crimson head and jagged spikes bristling as it stood tall. Its menacing roar and powerful clawed arms made it clear just how dangerous it was. Drudigan was a dragon-type Pokémon, but also a cave Pokémon. Wild Drudigan were notorious for their violent temperaments. They often occupied tunnels dug out by other Pokémon, lying in wait for prey to pass by. Seeing the fearsome Drudigan, Johan's expression turned a bit strange. It wasn't the green Drudigan he had expected, but it was undoubtedly one of Claire's main Pokémon. Drudigan had long been the laughingstock of the dragon-type family. Ground types like Garchomp could fly, but Drudigan? Despite having wings, it couldn't even get off the ground. Add to that its habit of hiding in caves, and it really didn't fit the imposing image of dragon Pokémon. That said, its sheer force ability made it an incredibly dangerous opponent with immense offensive potential. Johan leaned toward Haunter and whispered, "We're just here to go through the motions. If it gets too tough, we retreat. That badge isn't even good-looking, so let's focus on staying uninjured." Drudigan likely had sheer force and could be holding a life orb, which would significantly boost its move's power. Haunter wouldn't survive more than 2 hits. "Caw-caw." Haunter grinned and nodded, its eyes narrowing as it focused. "Begin!" The referee's flag dropped. Johan took a deep breath, his focus sharpening. Seeing his determined expression, Claire smirked. "Now we're talking." With a snap of her whip, she commanded, "Drudigan, Dragon Claw!" "Roar!" Drudigan let out a fearsome roar, its navy blue claws glowing faintly with purple dragon-type energy as it charged toward Haunter with terrifying strength. Johan's Pokédex confirmed his suspicion. Drudigan had sheer force. Haunter, dive into the shadows. Though Drudigan's attack looked menacing, its speed was a glaring weakness. Wild Drudigan often ambushed prey from caves rather than chasing them down, precisely because they lacked agility. Haunter needed to capitalize on its superior speed to stand a chance. "Caw-caw." Taunting Drudigan with a tongue-out gesture, Haunter sank into the shadows on the floor. Claire chuckled. "Attack the shadows." Swish. Swish. Drudigan's claws tore through the ground, sending rocks and debris flying everywhere. Boom! A loud crack rang out, accompanied by wisps of black smoke rising from the rubble. A substitute. When did it use that? Claire frowned. "Drudigan, dig." Drudigan immediately burrowed into the ground, using the destruction it had already caused as cover. Meanwhile, 3 eerie blue-purple flames streaked through the air, landing on the empty battlefield and fizzing out harmlessly. Haunter reappeared in the shadows behind where Drudigan had been standing, looking perplexed. For once, its sneak attack hadn't worked. Haunter, set up another substitute. Johan called. Haunter, though caught off guard, didn't hesitate. Quickly created another shadowy doppelganger. Roar! Drudigan erupted from the ground, its jagged fangs cloaked in dark energy. Crunch! The substitute shattered into pieces. Lance, watching from the sidelines, was enthralled. Both trainers were demonstrating top-tier strategy and prediction, enough to make him itch for a battle with Johan himself. But the tide of the match was clear. Claire had the upper hand. Haunter had already burned through 2 substitutes, leaving its stamina noticeably drained. Wait? Lance's eyes widened. Drudigan was poisoned. When did that happen? A faint purple sheen spread across Drudigan's scales. Toxic. Caw-caw. Haunter let out a wicked cackle. Claire replayed the battle in her mind, quickly piecing it together. The substitute was poisoned? Lance's observation was accurate. Even with toxic, Drudigan's raw power made it a formidable opponent. Haunter didn't have much time to outlast it. Toxic stall strategies might be effective, but they were hard to execute in real battles, especially against strong opponents. Drud again, crunch again. Roar! Poison's pain only fueled Drudigan's ferocity. Its attacks grew more aggressive. But Claire and Lance both noticed something alarming. Toxic was eating away at Drudigan's scales. This wasn't just ordinary poison, it was exceptionally potent. Unbeknownst to them, Haunter had been training with toxic orbs and consuming poisonous materials as snacks. Toxic was in a league of its own. As Drudigan lunged forward, Johan and Haunter shared a focused glance. This was it, the decisive moment. Hypnosis! Caca! Hey, big red face! Haunter clapped its hands together and shouted, drawing Drudigan's gaze. Concentric rings of hypnotic light emanated from Haunter's eyes, spiraling toward Drudigan. The dragon staggered mid-charge, then collapsed onto the ground, snoring loudly. Is it over? Drudigan, sleep talk. Claire's voice cut through the tension. Still asleep, Drudigan's jaws opened, dark energy coalescing into a sphere. Dark pulse! Haunter, protect! A green barrier enveloped Haunter just in time to block the incoming attack. Dream Eater! Haunter spread its claws wide, a misty white fog enveloping Drudigan as it drained its energy. Haunter's own stamina surged back. Drudigan, sleep talk again. Haunter, finish it, sludge bomb. This time, sleep talk triggered Shadow Claw, but Haunter's poisonous attack landed first. The noxious sludge splattered across Drudigan's body, overwhelming it. Boom! Drudigan's attack faltered, and it collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Drudigan is unable to battle. The winner is the challenger, Johan. Claire stood silently, replaying the match in her head. If she'd opened with taunt, would things have gone differently? After a moment, she concluded. I didn't lose. Johan just fights dirtier than me. Still, she collected herself and approached Johan, handing him the rising badge and a Dragon Pulse TM. As Johan pocketed the TM, Haunter grabbed the badge, inspecting it closely. Caca! Not bad at all. Graduation! We've finally graduated. From now on, we're proud members of Team Rocket, the evil trio. A woman with long red hair, dressed in the signature white Team Rocket uniform, sat in a corner, clenching her fists as her eyes blazed with fiery determination. At last, a stable job. The blue-haired man sitting beside her let out a deep sigh of relief. I heard we've already been assigned a mission, Meow. This time, the speaker was a Pokémon, a Meowth. Apart from ending its sentences with Meow, it seemed almost entirely human. These three were none other than the infamous Team Rocket trio of the future. Jessie, James, and Meowth. Just graduated, and they're already entrusting us with a crucial mission. Team Rocket really knows how to value talent. Looks like we made the right choice. Jessie was already daydreaming about capturing countless rare Pokémon to offer to Giovanni, leading to promotions and a fat raise. Her words earned fervent nods of agreement from James and Meowth. The three huddled together, their imaginations merging into a shared vision of a glittering future. Speaking of which, Jessie broke the silence, popping the imaginary bubble of their shared fantasy. Now that we're this awesome, shouldn't we come up with an opening speech befitting our evil trio status? That's a great idea. James's eyes lit up, punching his palm in realization. It has to be something catchy, Meow, Meowth added. Click-clack-click. The sound of heels echoed down the hallway. When the trio turned to look, their eyes widened in recognition. It's that bowl-cut glasses girl. Matori's forehead twitched, a vein bulging as she barely resisted the urge to throttle them. How dare you address a Team Rocket executive like that, she snapped. What? She's an executive? Jessie's eyes went wide with disbelief. James hurriedly grabbed Jessie's arm and whispered urgently, Don't lose your cool. Meowth chimed in. Not just an executive, Meow, but also Giovanni's secretary. Despite their attempt at discretion, it was painfully obvious that the trio was whispering about her. Midori's eye twitched as she glared at them. "I can hear everything you're saying." The vein on her forehead pulsed more visibly. "I see you three are eager for a pay cut and demotion. NOOO." The three immediately threw themselves at her, clutching her arms and legs as they cried. "We're sorry, Executive Midori. We know we were wrong." Crack. Crack. Midori's fists clenched audibly as she struggled to rein in her temper. But considering how much Giovanni valued this trio, she took a deep breath and, with forced calm, said, "You three will join me on this mission. Follow my orders." Trio quickly snapped to attention and saluted. "Yes, ma'am." "So, Executive Midori, what's our mission target?" Jessie asked, trying to sound professional. Midori shot her a warning glare. "I told you, my name is Midori." Jessie sulked but stayed quiet, while James offered a nervous smile and asked, "What's the mission, ma'am?" "Knowing the target will help us assist you better." Midori took another deep breath and, with a hint of reverence in her voice, replied, "This time we're going to visit another top-ranking executive, codename, the Advisor." The Advisor. Trio exchanged glances. Just hearing the title screamed high status. They could latch onto this executive. In unison, they silently chanted in their hearts. Promotions. Pay raises. Becoming executives. What a wonderful feeling. Back in Blackthorn City behind the gym. Having cleared the gym challenge and earned the Dragon Elder's approval, Lance and Claire led Johan and his Pokémon to a platform behind the gym. The area was surrounded by a lake, and in the distance, vague silhouettes of something ancient and majestic could be seen. Lance released his Gyarados from its Pokeball and climbed onto its back with a flourish of his cape. "Let's go." He extended a hand to Claire. "I don't need your help." Claire huffed, her cheeks flushing red. "I just don't want you to lose your footing," Lance teased, gently taking her hesitant hand and helping her onto Gyarados' back. "I'm the gym leader here. I can handle this just fine," Claire insisted, though her face remained red. Lance smirked, steadying her as she sat in front of him. "I still remember the first time you visited the Dragon's Den as a kid. You got scared of the dark and slid right off Dragonair's back." "Stop talking." Claire's face turned even redder as she gritted her teeth. She shot a quick glance at Johan, who was standing on the platform with Vulpix in his arms. Lance chuckled softly. "Oh, Johan, why aren't you coming?" Hugging Vulpix, Johan took a deep breath. "Call out your Dragonair." "Ha! I prefer to ride alone." Shrugging, Lance called out his Dragonair. But before he could warn Johan about how slippery Dragonair's body was, Claire pinched his leg. "You say one more word." Pretending not to notice the couple's antics, Johan mounted Dragonair. Tinkeratu perched behind him, while Haunter floated alongside, humming a tune. The group set off, crossing the lake toward a massive black opening resembling a dragon's maw, the entrance to the dragon's den. Inside, the narrow corridor was pitch black. Dragonair's pearls glowed faintly, illuminating the path ahead. "Caw-caw." Haunter, who had been preparing to scare everyone, let out a disappointed sigh as the light spoiled its plan. Dove into the water instead, swimming with exaggerated breaststroke motions. "Chew." Tinkeratu leaned over, peering curiously into the water. Spotting its own reflection, it tilted its head. Suddenly, it plunged its hammer into the lake. When it pulled the hammer back up, a chunk of unknown metal was stuck to it. "Chew." Eyes wide with joy, Tinkeratu admired its find. Johan's expression grew strange. Somehow this behavior felt oddly familiar. "Gyarados." Johan began to ask about the red Gyarados, but before he could finish, the once calm water erupted violently. A massive crimson figure burst from the depths, sending waves crashing in all directions. Its menacing face, glowing red eyes, and the chaotic whirlpool it created were a sight to behold. "Roar!" The red Gyarados let out a furious bellow, startling everyone present. Even the wild Pokémon inhabiting the dragon's den, though accustomed to its tantrums, scattered in fear. Blub! Suddenly, a jet of water shot out from the lake, smacking the red Gyarados squarely in the face. Hydro Pump. Roar! The unexpected attack enraged Gyarados further. But before it could retaliate, another Hydro Pump hit it directly from a different angle. Roar! The third Hydro Pump wasn't any kinder. It went straight into Gyarados' open mouth. Choking and sputtering, the enraged dragon swiveled its head, searching for its attacker. A small, panicked blue head poked out of the water. A Dragonair, looking utterly disoriented, sent out yet another Hydro Pump in desperation. Smack! A yellow blur streaked through the air, delivering a swift smack to the Gyarados' head. The red Gyarados' attempt to charge a Hyper Beam was immediately interrupted. Johan's jaw dropped as he watched the scene unfold. Seriously? Triple Hydro Pump hits in a row. Flash. The rampaging red Gyarados was slammed back into the water, sending waves splashing everywhere. A gust of wind swept through, and as if controlled by unseen hands, the scattered water droplets obediently returned to the lake. Uwu. Having completed its job, the Dragonite, which had previously been admiring flowers in the field, casually flew back to its favorite tree. Picking up a flower, it resumed sniffing with serene satisfaction. This Dragonite was left behind by the former Blackthorn gym leader 2 generations ago, and now it serves as the guardian deity of the dragon's den, protecting everything here, Claire explained. Johan nodded thoughtfully. He had heard some rumors about this Dragonite before. When the earlier chaos erupted, Johan's system showed 3 Pokémon profiles. One was, of course, the incredibly fast Dragonite. Another was the furious red Gyarados Lance had captured. Gyarados. Type Water Flying. Ability Intimidate. Moves: Bite, Tackle, Leer, Twister, Bounce, Outrage, Whirlpool, Ice Fang, Brine, Scary Face. Mood: None. Its mind is completely scrambled. You must find a way to awaken its cognitive ability. Condition: Poor. Repeated injuries and starvation have left it in a weakened state. Friendliness: -50. Its aggressive nature is intrinsic to Gyarados. This was Johan's first time encountering a Pokémon with none as its mood. Could only mean one thing. The electromagnetic fields and currents from the Lake of Rage had reduced Gyarados to nothing but primal instincts. This was why Gyarados was so frenzied. It was simply acting on pure animalistic reflexes. Lance had every reason to struggle with this Pokémon. Even Aerodactyl, another ferocious Pokémon Lance had caught, still retained enough intelligence to communicate and follow commands, albeit with occasional fits of rebellion. This Gyarados, however, had almost completely lost its ability to think or communicate. And without communication, even a Pokémon psychologist like Johan was powerless. How could he treat a Pokémon without establishing dialogue? Johan, any thoughts? Lance asked, noticing Johan's solemn expression. Johan pressed his lips together but didn't answer. His gaze shifted to the figure floating near the surface of the lake not far from the unconscious Gyarados. It was a slender, snake-like Pokémon covered in pale blue scales with a white underbelly. A small white bump adorned its forehead, while delicate fins extended from the sides of its head. Its large, round, white nose gave it an almost innocent appearance. This was none other than Dratini, the first form of Dragonite, a dragon Pokémon classified as a pseudo-legendary in the Kanto region. Though not particularly small, measuring over 2 meters in length, it looked rather diminutive compared to the hulking Gyarados. Yet, the little Dratini showed no fear. Its light purple eyes gleamed with sharp determination. Johan's system displayed its profile as well. Dratini. Type Dragon. Ability Marvel Scale. Moves: Extreme Speed, Supersonic, Wrap, Leer, Twister, Thunderwave, Dragon Tail, Slam, Aqua Tail, Safeguard, Hydro Pump, Thunderbolt, Icy Wind. Mood: Apprehensive. How did I get into this situation? Determined. Only the weak rely on luck. Condition: excellent, though technically listed as excellent, it should more accurately be overnourished. Friendliness: 10, you're almost as good-looking as me. Johan stared at the serious-looking Dratini and glanced at its internal monologue in the system. There seemed to be a mismatch somewhere. This Dratini had a lot of inner drama. Its condition was also a first for Johan: overnourished. Claire noticed Johan's gaze and sighed, rubbing her temples. That Dratini is the youngest of the Guardian Dragonite's children. It's incredibly competitive. Claire explained that the Dratini had been in the dragon's den for years but showed no signs of evolution. Still, its unyielding desire to prove itself led it to aspire to guard the sanctuary alongside its father. So whenever the Red Gyarados acted out, this Dratini would always rush to confront it. Unfortunately, its strength fell far short of its ambition. Competitive? Protect the sanctuary. Johan glanced again at Dratini's mood, specifically the apprehensive "how did I get into this situation" entry. If that could be remotely linked to competitiveness, he'd believe anything at this point. Its move set, however, was undeniably impressive. Dratini, sensing the group's gaze, puffed up with even more determination. Turning toward the unconscious Gyarados, it let out a loud, commanding cry. Dry-eye! When the Gyarados failed to react, Dratini discreetly exhaled in relief and slowly began swimming toward the shore. The display of bravery earned approving looks from Haunter, Vulpix, and Tinkeratu. This was clearly a Pokémon worthy of respect. Buoyed by their acknowledgement, Dratini lifted its head higher, radiating newfound pride. But as it reached the water's edge, its dampened surroundings caused it to slip. Flash! Dratini fell unceremoniously back into the lake, sending up bubbles as it sank. Johan! After floundering for a moment, it managed to pull itself back onto dry land, coughing up water. Was this really the same Dratini that had nailed a hydro pump 3 times in a row? Suddenly, the unconscious Gyarados twitched and woke up. Roar! With a powerful tail sweep, it created another massive wave. The wave dragged Dratini, who had just reached the shore, back into the water. Dry! Sigma, LLL. Caught off guard, Dratini opened its mouth in panic, instinctively firing off another hydro pump that smacked Gyarados square in the face, flipping the giant beast onto its back. Another hydro pump lands. Johan pressed his lips into a thin line, a glint of realization in his eyes. The law of conservation of luck. This Dratini likely had terrible luck in daily life, but during battle, all that bad fortune seemed to reverse into miraculous success. Looking at the feisty Dratini squaring off against Gyarados once more, Johan couldn't help but think of Claire's description. An overachieving Pokémon? No. This was a Pokémon doomed to be overachieving. However, there was little time to dwell on such thoughts. Priority was still the Gyarados. Johan gestured subtly to Lance, signaling him to keep Dragonite out of the fight. Tinkeratu! Knock it out! Chew! Snapping out of its reverie, Tinkeratu tightened its power band and lifted its hammer. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! The hammer spun like a whirlwind in its hands, building up momentum. A layer of earthy brown energy began to wrap around the hammer, solidifying into a sharp and heavy stone edge. Leaping high into the air, Tinkeratu bent its body like a taut bowstring, raising the hammer overhead. Chew! Its gaze sharpened, and with a powerful swing, the hammer came crashing down. Smash! The rock-covered hammer shattered on impact, the sheer force causing Gyarados to shudder violently before collapsing back into the lake with a massive splash. Already in a weakened state, Gyarados stood no chance against the combined efforts of Dratini and Tinkeratu. Landing gracefully, Tinkeratu twirled its hammer and gave Haunter and Vulpix a smug look. Didn't embarrass the Johan team, did I? Caca, B. Haunter gave an enthusiastic thumbs up. With Gyarados subdued once again, Johan rubbed his chin in thought. Lance and Claire exchanged a look, hesitant to interrupt his contemplation. After a while, Johan finally spoke. Gyarados has completely lost its ability to think. To heal it, we need to restore some cognitive function first. I have a risky idea. What is it? Claire asked. Electrotherapy. Electrotherapy? Both Lance and Claire blinked in surprise. Johan shrugged. Since electromagnetic fields and currents caused its condition, we can try controlled stimulation to revive some semblance of mental activity. Even if it only triggers fear or anger, that could be the breakthrough we need. He didn't mention that earlier when Dragonite had used Thunder Punch, Gyarados' mood in the system had briefly flickered with activity. Won't it make things worse? Claire ventured cautiously. How much worse can it get? Johan countered. Fair enough. I trust your judgment, Lance declared resolutely. Claire offered, should we have Dragonite assist? Johan shook his head. Dragonite's too strong. This was electrotherapy, not electrocution. Lance reached for his Pokeballs. Before he could release another Pokemon, Johan stopped him. Yours won't work, Heather. Lance's Pokemon, while powerful, lacked the fine control required for this task. Then who? Lance frowned, wondering if they needed to recruit an electric-type specialist. That one. Johan pointed to Dratini, who had just crawled back onto the shore. Dry. The Dratini froze, its face blank with disbelief. Me? Even Johan couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. This Dratini was truly overachieving against its will. Johan crouched in front of Dratini, meeting its confused gaze with a warm smile. You're so amazing, I know you'll help us, right? Dry? Amazing? Me? Friendliness. 20. Not only is this guy handsome, but he's got a silver tongue. Noticing the change, Johan grinned and handed Dratini a few poke blocks. Dratini happily devoured them, its eyes gleaming. Dry. Delicious. Yes, Thunderbolt. Under Dratini's bewildered gaze, Johan nodded affirmatively. Dratini glanced at the unconscious Gyarados dragged ashore and nervously swallowed. The big guy was finally asleep, waking it up again. But when Dratini noticed that Tinkeratu, Lance, Claire, and even its father Dragonite were all watching, it took a deep breath, its expression turning resolute. The great Dratini fears no pretender dragon. Crackle. Dratini's body sparked with thin streams of electricity, which quickly converged into a single powerful bolt that surged from the horn on its forehead straight at Gyarados. For a moment, the massive, motionless Gyarados began to twitch violently. Even in its unconscious state, the familiar sensation of electricity caused its eyes to snap open as it let out an instant, furious roar. Roar! A savage aura exploded from Gyarados as its jaws opened wide, gathering terrifying energy. Johan frowned slightly and gave a low command. Tinkeratu! Chew! Already prepared, Tinkeratu swung its hammer with all its might, delivering a crushing blow to Gyarados' head. Thud! Gyarados shuddered, its eyes rolling back as it collapsed unconscious once again. Boom! Its massive body hit the ground, shaking it so hard that even Dratini trembled. Lance, Claire. Johan remained unfazed, turning to the two. They nodded understandingly and approached to spray Gyarados with a healing mist. Dratini let out a sigh of relief. But just as it thought its mission was over, Johan's voice rang out again. Dratini, one more time. Dry. Dratini blinked in confusion. One more time? Really? After receiving Johan's firm confirmation, Dratini, though still confused, dutifully complied. Crackle. The golden arcs of electricity surged once more, baptizing Gyarados yet again. When the newly awakened Gyarados was hammered unconscious by Tinkeratu for the second time, and Johan again asked Dratini to repeat the process, the little dragon finally began to realize the gravity of its task. That moment, it cast a pitying glance at the unconscious Gyarados. Then, crackle! Johan couldn't help but think that if this were a video game, Tinkeratu's experience bar would be skyrocketing right now. Dratini, on the other hand, was panting heavily, seemingly unable to count how many thunderbolts it had unleashed. Meanwhile, Tinkeratu stood ready with its hammer, still looking eager for action. Haunter and Vulpix covered their eyes in unison, unable to watch any longer. The difference, however, was that Haunter peeked through its claws, while Vulpix used its tail to leave a gap. Cruel. Absolutely cruel. Back when Haunter was still a ghastly and helped Roxanne deal with her stone-headed nosepass, it only took a few tries before they stopped. It was never this brutal. "Caca," Haunter muttered under its breath. "So this is what real torment looks like." Dry. Gritting its teeth, Dratini unleashed another bolt of electricity. Gyarados jerked awake once again. But this time, the roaring beast didn't immediately lash out. Johan's eyes gleamed as he quickly commanded, "Tinkeratu, hold on." Chew. Tinkeratu froze mid-charge, its hammer already raised. But it obediently halted. The silence lasted all of 3 seconds. Roar! Gyarados let out another deafening roar. Yet this time the sound carried not just rage but also something else. Lance, Claire, and even Dragonite noticed the subtle change. After a moment of growling, Gyarados collapsed again. But it didn't lose consciousness this time. Instead, it lay on the ground with dull, vacant eyes. Gyarados 3-angle. Meanwhile, Johan's system interface displayed a long-awaited update. Mood, despair, pain. So much pain. Johan rubbed his temples. Although Gyarados had undoubtedly suffered, the process had finally restored a degree of cognitive function. Vulpix. Johan called softly. Uwu. The little fox trotted over. Help it sleep well. Johan sighed. Uwu. Vulpix nodded. Joined Johan in front of the despairing Gyarados, channeling a hypnotic wave. Haunter and Tinkeratu followed closely behind, standing guard in case Gyarados tried anything. Fortunately, the beast, still utterly exhausted, soon succumbed to the combined hypnosis and drifted into a deep slumber. Snores echoed loudly. Nearby, Dratini had also collapsed, completely drained. "How's it looking, Johan?" Lance, who had been holding his breath, finally broke the silence. Johan pondered briefly. It went smoother than expected. From here on, it's just a matter of slow rehabilitation, specifically helping Gyarados recover from its severe psychological trauma. Hearing this, Lance and Claire exchanged relieved glances. Then, "I'll stay in Blackthorn City for a few more days to monitor Gyarados' progress before leaving." Johan gave them a reassuring nod. Having taken on this responsibility, he wouldn't leave until Gyarados was stable. "I'll arrange accommodations for you," Claire offered. "Wait." Johan glanced at the nearby, deeply asleep Dratini. After a moment's thought, he gently picked it up. Surprisingly, despite its over 2-meter length, Dratini weighed barely 4 or 5 kilograms, making it exceedingly light. With little effort, Johan placed it beneath the large tree in the flower field. The little dragon's luck was so bad that, if left near Gyarados, it might accidentally get crushed the next time the beast shifted. Nestled in the soft flower bed, Dratini rolled over and mumbled faintly. "Dry. I, Dratini, will never be inferior to any dragon." Johan chuckled softly and patted its head. "Good work today." He left behind a pile of poke blocks before heading off with Claire. After treating Gyarados' wounds, Lance wiped the sweat from his brow and stood up, only to notice someone standing behind him. Turning, he saw the Dragon Elder, who had been napping during the gym battle. "Elder," Lance greeted. The old man smiled kindly and waved, his demeanor entirely unpretentious. He then turned to Dragonite, who sat by the lake shore, idly swinging its feet. "Dragonite, what do you think?" Dragonite scratched its chin thoughtfully before nodding. "Uwu." The elder's smile deepened. "Is that so? That's how you feel?" Understanding their cryptic exchange, Lance's eyes lit up. "Lance, your friend's bond with his Pokémon, his recognition of them, and his compassion for wounded Pokémon have passed the dragon trial." The elder walked over to Lance and added, If he wishes, he may capture a Pokémon within the dragon's den. Thank you, Elder. This had been Lance's secret hope all along. He hadn't told Johan, but this was the reason he wanted him to treat Gyarados here in the dragon's den. With the Elder's approval, Johan could now form a bond with one of the Pokémon in this sacred space. Of course, the chosen Pokémon would need to willingly accept him as its trainer. That evening in Blackthorn City, as the sun set, Johan strolled through the lively streets with his Pokémon, enjoying the local culture and famous night market. Sitting on a bench, they enjoyed their spoils of street food. Haunter devoured a skewer of rice dumplings, grinning mischievously as it somehow produced a fresh skewer from its mouth after finishing the first. Vulpix licked a rainbow-colored lollipop shaped like a pumpkaboo, its newfound love of sweets making Johan frequently check its teeth. Tinkeratu, drenched in sweat, tackled a bowl of spicy red ramen. Even as it fanned its tongue, it added half a tube of wasabi to the broth. Johan couldn't help but chuckle. Want some ice cream to cool down? Tinkeratu nodded vigorously, tears streaming from its fiery meal. Caca! Oh! Haunter and Vulpix raised their paws eagerly. Asterisk. 2 asterisk. Johan smiled, returning shortly with cones for everyone. As they savored their treats, he snapped a selfie and posted it online. Ding! He eats cabbage. I want one. Tell us Jengar emoji. Hooked another one, Johan thought with a smirk. He replied, Grain in the field, come and get one. He eats cabbage. Garchomp pout emoji. Seeing the photo of Garchomp pouting, Johan chuckled. By the way, could you pick up some dragon scales from the Dragon Clan for me? Garchomp's food supply is running low, the next message read. Dragon scales as food? Johan blinked in surprise. Of course, what Cynthia referred to were the molted scales of dragon-type Pokémon, commonly used as nutritious snacks for other dragon types. She sent him the payment shortly after. The same time, another notification popped up. Little Growlithe, I've been entrusted with an important mission at the factory. Just wanted to share my excitement with someone. Sorry to bother you. How polite. Grain in the field. Not at all, congratulations.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.